Chapter 1641. In the hall, looking at Miao Xian's strange expression, Yin Huan couldn't help asking, "Uncle, do you know Lin Sun?" Miao Xian asked, "Haven't you heard of this name in the ancient wilderness these days?" Ao Zhentian suddenly said, "Is Lin Sun the one regarded as the first in the 9 regions battlefield?" Miao Xian nodded. Yin Huan and Ao Zhentian looked at each other and were surprised. It was really him. These days, when they visited the ancient wilderness, they heard the story of the victory in the Battle of the 9 Regions everywhere. Among them, the name Lin Sun was mentioned the most. How could Yin Huan and Ao Zhentian not have heard of it? But they never thought that this Lin Sun was that Lin Sun. So, this person is still a great figure. To be able to suppress the talents of the 8 regions by himself, he should at least have the foundation of the invincible true sage realm. Yin Huan became a little interested and thought about it. Although she came from the starry sky ancient path, she was not arrogant. She knew very well how unusual the title of the first in the 9 regions battlefield was. In the past 2 battles of the 9 regions, there had been 2 strong people who won the title of the first in the 9 regions battlefield, and in the following years, they all stepped into the Emperor Realm. The Emperor Realm was a terrible existence like a giant on the starry sky ancient path. Could Lin Sun also step into the Emperor Realm in the future? It was hard to say. But it was certain that since he could become the first in the 9 regions battlefield, his foundation and aptitude must be enough for him to have the qualification to break through to the Emperor Realm in the future. Ao Zhentian obviously also realized this and couldn't help but nod. If so, this boy deserves our attention. Miao Xian couldn't help shaking his head with a wry smile. Attention? You guys had completely ignored him just now. Miao Xian also knew how proud the strong on the starry sky ancient path was. They would not only have a sense of superiority when facing the ancient wilderness. Even when facing the strong in the other 8 regions, it was generally the same. Especially for the amazing figures like Yin Huan and Ao Zhentian, only those who were more dazzling and stronger than them could be taken seriously by them. As for those who were weaker than them, it was impossible to attract their attention. Unfortunately, their pattern, background, vision and cognition determined that they made mistakes in their treatment of Lin Sun. Immediately, Miao Xian realized a problem and asked, "7th Prince, are you sure the person you're looking for is beside Lin Sun?" At the same time, Lin Sun, who was standing outside the hall, also began to pay attention. He had already guessed something in his heart, but he just needed to confirm it. In the hall, Ao Zhentian said in a deep voice, "Yes, a few days ago, Miss Yin Huan and I went to the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure and met a relative of my true dragon. From him, I learned that the person I was looking for was beside Lin Sun." "A relative?" Mr. Miao Xian was startled. Ao Zhentian said, "Yan Zhanqiu's mother's bloodline is somewhat related to our true dragon clan." Mr. Miao Xian suddenly understood and immediately asked, "Then who are you looking for?" Ao Zhentian didn't hide it and said directly, "She should be called Zhao Jingxian now. Her mother is a core member of the true dragon clan. According to seniority, she is my aunt and Zhao Jingxian is my cousin." After a pause, he continued, "I came here to take my cousin back to the clan to participate in the gathering of dragons. My grandfather ordered that my cousin should also participate." "The gathering of dragons?" Miao Xian was surprised. "So, in your true dragon clan, there will be a descendant who can inherit the ancestral dragon blood?" Yin Huan said, "Yes, this matter has long been spread on the starry sky ancient path, and the one who can inherit the ancestral dragon blood is the 7th Prince. Amazing, the gathering of dragons is held every tens of thousands of years. This is a grand event that can cause a sensation on the starry sky ancient path." Miao Xian exclaimed, "And if the 7th Prince can inherit the ancestral dragon blood, he will sooner or later transform into the rare Taoist body of the ancestral dragon, and his future will be limitless." He didn't expect that Ao Zhentian's talent was so great. As a descendant of the true dragon clan, he had a unique and terrifying foundation, which was far superior to the descendants of most clans in the world. In the true dragon clan, there was only 1 in 10,000 descendants who could inherit the ancestral dragon blood, and even one could not be seen for a long time. Therefore, every time there was a strong person who could inherit the ancestral dragon blood, the ancestral dragon clan would hold a gathering of dragons. Even on the starry sky ancient path, this was a shocking event. Because of this, Miao Xian couldn't help but exclaim. In the face of such praise, Ao Zhentian smiled reservedly, and there was a faint disdain between his eyebrows. But at this moment, he suddenly caught a glimpse of Lin's figure. He frowned and said, "Why are you back again?" Yin Huan was also stunned, and her eyes became extremely cold. Miao Xian just wanted to say something, but Lin Sun had gone straight to Ao Zhentian and said, "You said you want to take Jingxian away?" His voice was cold and his expression was calm, without any emotional fluctuation. But compared with the time in the hall just now, Lin Sun seemed to be a different person at this moment, with an invisible power pervading the air. Ao Zhentian was stunned at first, as if he couldn't believe that Lin Sun dared to speak to him so rudely. His eyes became cold. "This has nothing to do with you. I advise you to pay attention to what you say. This is the divine secret pavilion. For the sake of Miao Xian, I won't argue with you. Otherwise, you would have been a dead man for such an attitude." As he spoke, a vast aura emerged from his body like a dragon's roar, and it pressed towards Lin Sun like a landslide and a tsunami. He sat on the ground, and Lin Sun seemed to be looking down on him when he spoke. This made his dignity difficult to tolerate, and he wanted to suppress Lin Sun to the ground. But when Ao Zhentian's power pressed towards Lin Sun, it disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea, and Lin Sun's figure didn't move at all. Ao Zhentian narrowed his eyes and laughed angrily. "Oh, I didn't expect that you have some ability." As he spoke, he intended to use his real strength. But Yin Huan stopped him and said, "Seventh Prince, don't be impatient. I have something to ask him." As she said, she stood up. Like Ao Zhentian, she didn't want to talk to Lin Sun in the way of looking up. "You suddenly came back," called Jing Xian, and questioned the seventh prince aggressively. "If I'm not mistaken, you are Lin Sun." She was dressed in white, and her black hair was tied with a red string. She looked like a cold fairy on the top of an ice and snow mountain, but her words were still indifferent and her attitude was still arrogant. Miao Xian said, "Yes, this little friend is Lin Sun. Let's sit down and talk together." He intended to ease the atmosphere. But Ao Zhentian suddenly stood up, and his eyes burst with sharp light. He looked directly at Lin Sun. "It turns out that you are Lin Sun. Tell me where Zhao Jingxian is now, and I will let bygones be bygones and give you a generous reward. What do you think?" His words were filled with excitement, but there was also a hint of arrogance in his tone. Miao Xian thought it was bad. "Sure enough," Lin Sun said indifferently with cold eyes, "let bygones be bygones? Who do you think you are? How dare you say I'm wrong?" Ao Zhentian's face darkened and his breath was terrible, like an angry dragon god. His tall figure exuded an oppressive power, which made the atmosphere in the hall suddenly oppressive and solemn. "Seventh Prince, you must bear it. We need this person's help now. Otherwise, if you want to bring back Zhao Jingxian this time, I'm afraid there will be many twists and turns." Yin Huan hurriedly transmitted her voice. "Humph, does he think he can be lawless after becoming the strongest in the 9 regions battlefield? In my opinion, we should directly suppress him, and I don't believe he won't bow his head." Ao Zhentian snorted coldly. Of course, he also transmitted his voice. "No, this is the ancient desolation realm after all, not the starry sky ancient path. Lin Sun is famous all over the world now, and his reputation is like the sun in the sky. Even my martial uncle Miao Xian will definitely protect him, and not let us suppress him." Yin Huan calmly analyzed, and then she looked at Lin Sun and said, My friend, we were negligent just now, please forgive us. Lin Sun said, Friend? Haha. The sarcastic laughter made Yin Huan angry. She had already taken a step back, but this guy didn't appreciate it at all. Ao Zhentian's face also darkened. In his opinion, Lin Sun's action was to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Seeing the tense atmosphere, Miao Xian smiled bitterly and had to say, My young friend, it was just a small conflict before. For my sake, I hope you can bury the hatchet. Lin Sun said flatly, There's no need to bury the hatchet. I'm not on the same side as them. But I'll say this, whoever wants to take Zhao Jingxian away must go through me first. After that, he stepped out of the hall. Ao Zhentian really came to take Zhao Jingxian away. No matter what his intention was, Lin Sun couldn't tolerate it. Unless Zhao Jingxian herself was willing, no one could force her to do so as long as he was here. What about the mysterious pavilion? What about the true dragon clan? Lin Sun had never been afraid of anyone since he started cultivating. Seeing Lin Sun being so ruthless, Ao Zhentian was completely furious and shouted, Who do you think you are? You can come and go as you please? Stay here. Boom. He stretched out his hand. It was like a dragon claw stretching out of the clouds, covering the sky and covering the sun. It seemed that it could grasp the universe, the sun, and the moon in its palm. With the power of Miao Xian, it was enough to stop all this, but he couldn't help being angry at this moment. It was Ao Zhentian's fault first, and he had to ask Lin Sun for help. But his attitude was still so arrogant, and he even wanted to fight with Lin Sun. It was too much. Then let me show you the power of the strong in the ancient desolation territory. Miao Xian thought in his heart. He didn't intervene. Just as the claw was about to cover Lin Sun, a golden tribulation rune suddenly rushed out from behind Lin Sun and turned into the phantom of the divine beast Baihu. With a rumble, it stepped on the air and collided with the claw. Chapter 1642. Yin Huan's expression did not change at all. As the top one in the 9 regions battlefield, it was reasonable for Lin Sun to be able to block Ao Zhentian's blow. Otherwise, he was just an undeserved reputation. But Ao Zhentian's eyes narrowed, and he said angrily, The profound meaning of the real dragon, you thief, how dare you cultivate the Tao of my clan? What? Yin Huan was also surprised at this time. The Tao of the real dragon was the power of the real dragon. Lin Sun was obviously a human. How could he comprehend and master such a power of the real dragon? It was very abnormal. Lin Sun turned around and said indifferently, The real dragon is just one of the Tao in the world. Why can't I cultivate it? Ao Zhentian's handsome face was gloomy, and his eyes were full of killing intent. He said, I see, what you cultivate is the 9 transformations of the dragon. Only the 9 transformations of the dragon can enable you, a lowly thief, to steal the power of the real dragon. 9 transformations of the dragon. Yin Huan thought hard, but she couldn't figure out why there was such an inheritance in the world. Lowly? Thief? Theft? Lin Sun looked at Ao Zhentian with his hands behind his back and said, Do you really think I don't dare to slay the dragon? As he said, he took a step forward, and the aura around him suddenly turned into a furnace that smelted everything in the universe. The terrible power spread, making the void wail. Compared with the simple and calm appearance before, he was like a different person. Yin Huan's eyes narrowed. How strong? Slay the dragon? You're courting death. Ao Zhentian suddenly shouted. His figure was like a real dragon, and his aura covered the sky and the earth. Above his head, a starry sky appeared. A real dragon roamed in it, and its body stretched endlessly, crushing hundreds of millions of galaxies. Whoosh! He tore the void and pressed towards Lin Sun. The sharp finger force was covered with obscure Taoist scales, which seemed to be able to tear the sky and the earth and disturb the yin and yang. Just the aura it emitted was enough to make the top sages tremble. It was terrible. It gave people the feeling that they were fighting against a true dragon in the sky, and they were like ants, incomparably insignificant. This was a kind of spiritual intimidation. Lin Sun didn't look happy or sad. He didn't even look at them. In his heart, the furnace of the Great Way was reflected, smelting the essence of all Tao and developing the wonders of all methods. As he pressed his hand out, boom! In the void image of a furnace appeared. It was massive and immeasurable, possessing the power to suppress endless ages, undying and glorious might. Great Tao Furnace Scripture. This was also the first time that Lin Sun used it in a battle after he created his own method. In an instant, the force exerted by Ao Zhentian's claw was crushed into powder, and it caused deafening rumbling to resound. The furnace was vigorous as it continued to smash downwards. Upon closer inspection, the cauldron gave off a heavy and boundless feeling of essence as one. Inside the cauldron, all kinds of great Daos fused together, yin and yang rotated, Taiji was born, water and fire complemented each other, hardness and softness were formed, undying true dragons swam in the middle of the abyss, and the mysteries of star and were hidden inside the furnace. On the other hand, all sorts of obscure techniques were branded in the surroundings of the furnace. There were figures that shook the heavens and the earth executing fist techniques, a myriad of strands of sword chi that surged like an ocean, and just one furnace contained all the mysteries of the Great Way. However, only Lin Sun could understand the mysteries and scenes in it. In the eyes of others, there was only one kind of phenomenon in this furnace. Everything could be broken. Before Ao Zhentian could react, he was knocked away by the furnace of the Great Way. His body smashed hard on the wall of the hall, and blood spurted from his mouth and nose. His protective power was tumbling violently. If not, this blow alone was enough to make him unable to bear it. What kind of method was this? Yin Huan finally couldn't calm down. Her beautiful eyes changed, and she was shocked. The style of that single blow was full of countless mysteries, which made her feel an indescribable sense of amazement and shock just by watching it. Although Yin Huan recognized Lin Sun's identity as the first person in the Nine Regions battlefield before, she didn't fear or attach importance to him because he ranked 9th on the beauty list of Starry Sky. But now, she found that she had underestimated the ancient Desolation realm and Lin Sun in front of her. Wonderful! Miao Xian praised in his heart. Originally, when Lin Sun and Ao Zhentian fought, he was a little worried. After all, the latter came from the Starry Sky ancient path, and was a direct descendant of the true dragon clan. But now it seemed that Lin Sun was not inferior at all, and even surpassed him. A pure-blood descendant of the true dragon is so weak? In the silence, Lin Sun said indifferently. In the distance, Ao Zhentian climbed up from the ground, and his strong figure was bathed in divine brilliance. Just from the surface, his injury was not serious. However, this strike made him feel humiliated and humiliated. He had lost all face. On the Starry Sky ancient path, although Ao Zhentian was not invincible, he was also a famous dazzling figure, and he had long possessed the momentum of invincibility. But now, in this ancient desolation realm that he completely despised, he was knocked away by a blow. This was like a stick that made his dignity suffer a blow. Come again! Ao Zhentian shouted. He didn't lose his mind because of anger. On the contrary, after this blow, he didn't dare to underestimate Lin Sun anymore, and he had used his real power. Boom! He strode forward while numerous profound Tao marking diagrams appeared beneath his feet, and his entire body emanated blazing and resplendent light. Rising dragon in the sky! His body suddenly stretched out, and the clouds and mist rose, and the divine brilliance surged. He was like a true dragon riding on the clouds, with the momentum of swallowing the 4 seas. But before he got close, he was broken by a furnace phantom. His body staggered out, and his hair was disheveled, and his muscles and bones made an unbearable friction sound. Yin Huan opened her beautiful eyes wide in disbelief. She knew how terrible Aogentian's strength was. If it was someone else of the same generation, it would be impossible for him to resist such a fierce attack. But in Lin Sun's hands it seemed very weak. There is always someone stronger than you. There is always someone stronger than you. But Lin Sun's combat power is too powerful. The furnace of immortality can break all the rules. Miao Xian couldn't help but be moved. This is the character who wants to enter the Starry Sky True Sage list? Lin Sun said again. His words were full of sarcasm. Being defeated successively with a single strike caused Aogentian to feel dizzy and furious, and it was simply more uncomfortable than being slapped twice. Come again. Aogentian roared like an angry dragon. The pair of dragon horns on his head were full of obscure Taoist patterns, and his body was covered with dragon scales. His aura was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, he used the secret method of the true dragon. Every move he made had the unparalleled power to crush and crush everything. But no matter how powerful his power was, Lin Sun could break it with one method. A furnace of the great Tao. It was simple, direct, and focused on one thing. It was wondrous to the extreme, and it was terrifying to the extreme. Bang! Bang! In a short period of time, Aogentian was beaten down 7 or 8 times. From beginning to end, Aogentian had no power to resist. Yin Huan was stunned, and her mind was in turmoil. How could Lin Sun be so powerful? On the Starry Sky ancient path, there was such a powerful sage, but it was extremely rare. As long as one rose, he would definitely enter the Starry Sky True Sage list and become an invincible figure in the Starry Sky. However, Yin Huan didn't expect that in this ancient desolation realm, he would meet such a peerless person. Come again. At this time, Aogentian's hair was disheveled, his clothes were ragged, his body was cracked, and his mouth and nose were full of blood. His appearance was so miserable that it couldn't be described with words. You should know that if I wanted to kill you, I don't have to wait until now. If you don't know what's good for you, you deserve to die. Lin Sun said coldly. This was the divine secret pavilion. Although Miao Xian didn't intervene before, he was sure that once he revealed his intention to kill Aogentian, Miao Xian would definitely intervene. Sure enough, Miao Xian intervened. He put one hand on Aogentian's shoulder and said, "Seventh Prince, enough is enough." Aogentian's eyes were red with anger, but in the end, he took a few deep breaths to restrain his boiling anger, stared at Lin Sun for a while, and then left. Previously, he had almost lost all his face. How could he have the face to stay? He was not stupid, and naturally knew that if it wasn't for Miao Xian, Lin Sun would definitely dare to kill him without hesitation. Damn it! How could there be such a heaven-defying figure in this ancient desolation realm? Who taught him the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon? That's the taboo secret left by my ancestors. Aogentian's heart was in turmoil. This time he suffered such a big blow that he was a little out of balance and he needed to calm down. In the hall, the atmosphere became subtle as Aogentian left. Yin Huan's pretty face was complicated, and the way she looked at Lin Sun also changed. Witnessing Aogentian's repeated defeats also gave Yin Huan an unprecedented shock. She couldn't believe that such a figure was born in this ancient desolation realm, which completely subverted her previous understanding. If she had known that Lin Sun was such a great figure, she would not have ignored him as before. Unfortunately, it was too late to say this now. Lin Sun, it's not your fault, but you should be careful when you go to the Starry Sky ancient path in the future. Miao Xian reminded him by voice transmission. Lin Sun nodded to show that he understood. Even if the whole true dragon bloodline stood behind Aogentian, he would not be afraid and uneasy because of it. In fact, you misunderstood. Child Ao came here to take Miss Jingxian back to the true dragon bloodline. They are cousins and have a blood relationship. He will definitely not harm her. Yin Huan suddenly said, "If possible, I still hope that you can be generous and help Child Ao once. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Maybe you can take this opportunity to ease the relationship between you and Child Ao. Lin Sun said flatly, this is only Child Ao's idea. Unless Jing Xian is willing to go back with him, no one can force her. Yin Huan sighed faintly. She didn't want to stay any longer, so she turned around and left the hall. In fact, a faint sense of regret surged in her heart, but she quickly erased it. She came from the starry sky ancient path. While Lin Sun might be talented and powerful, but since he was born in the ancient desolation realm, he might not be able to reach that vast world in the future. After all, not everyone in this world was qualified to go to the starry sky ancient path. P.S. Goldfish updated some content about Taishian Sword Emperor, Wu Yang Battle Emperor, and Star Obscurity Battle Emperor on the official WeChat account. You can open WeChat and search for Xiaojinyu 233. After adding him as your follower, you can check the history. In addition, Goldfish also explained the plot of criticizing Ao Jintian and Yin Huan on the official WeChat account. After all, the two of them were just a thread, and their purpose was to draw out Zhao Jingshuan's identity. Chapter 1643. In the hall, Miao Xian also sighed and said apologetically, "My little friend, it's my fault this time. I didn't expect to cause such trouble." As he said, he bowed to Lin Sun. Miao Sun was a gentleman. Lin Sun hurriedly avoided Miao Xian and said, "Senior, this is just a conflict between me and Ao Jintian. It has nothing to do with you." Miao Xian smiled and invited Lin Sun to sit down. Then he said, "My little friend, can you listen to me about Ao Jintian?" Lin Sun said, "Please go ahead." Miao Xian thought for a while and said, "If you really care about Miss Jing Xian, you can let her follow Ao Jintian back to the bloodline of the true dragon." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and was a little surprised. Putting aside the prejudice against Ao Jintian, if Miss Jing Xian can participate in the gathering of dragons, her bloodline talent will definitely get unexpected benefits. Mr. Miao Xian explained, "This will be extremely important to her future cultivation. After all, this 10,000 dragon immortal gathering is only held once every tens of thousands of years. However, not everyone in the true dragon bloodline is qualified to participate in it. As far as I know, it is impossible for those who are not the direct descendants of the true dragon to participate in such a grand event. And all the descendants of the true dragon who participate in such a grand event have the opportunity to get the ancestral blood. This is the bloodline power left by the ancestor of the true dragon at the beginning of the chaos. As long as you refine it, there will be a wonderful atavism transformation. Do you know what this means for the descendants of the true dragon?" Before Lin Sun could answer, Miao Xian gently spat out 4 words from his lips: "The qualification to be a great emperor." Lin Sun was shocked and gasped. He still couldn't believe it and said, "Just by refining a part of the power, one can have the qualification to become a great emperor?" Miao Xian nodded and immediately said with a smile, "Of course it's not that easy to become a great emperor. However, it's already extremely great to have the qualification to become a great emperor. Some strong quasi-emperors can't have such qualification in their whole life." No wonder Miao Xian would make such a suggestion. The ancestral dragon blood alone was enough to make any descendant of the real dragon irresistible. The foundation of the true dragon bloodline is truly terrifying. He could not help but sigh. Mr. Miao Xian also sighed. True dragon, immortal phoenix, these are the legendary races of gods that are blessed by the heavens. No matter who it is, whether it is the starry sky ancient path or the entire 9 regions, no one can deny their power. Just like Ao Jintian. Even though he isn't a match for you now, his natural talent can be said to be heaven-defying. The myriad dragons and immortals meeting this time was held because of him. There's utterly no need to doubt that once he refines the energy of the ancestral dragon's true blood, he'll definitely be able to establish the true Dragon Tao body and possess the foundation to become an emperor. Lin Sun pondered in silence for a long time and finally said, I need to ask Jing Xian's opinion on this matter. If she is willing to go, I will never stop her. The meaning of his words was obvious. If Zhao Jingxian was unwilling, no one could take her away as long as Lin Sun was here. Mr. Miao Xian nodded. On the same day, Lin Sun wrote a letter and left his own imprint on it. He handed it to Mr. Miao Xian and sent it to the Star Chess Sea through the Divine Secret Pavilion. At the same time, Yin Huan was also talking to Ao Zhentian. Mr. Ao, we were too careless this time. In my opinion, even on the Starry Sky Ancient Path, Lin Sun's combat strength is enough to rank in the top 100 of the Starry Sky True Sage list. Yin Huan spoke in a low voice and comforted Ao Zhentian. However, he also has his shortcomings. If he doesn't have special methods, he's destined to be unable to enter the Starry Sky Ancient Path before becoming an emperor. After a pause, she continued, You also know that compared to the 9 regions, the Starry Sky Ancient Path is the true cultivation world. It's the source of all Tao, the origin of chaos, and the ancestral court of all orthodoxies in the heavens. Ancestral court. It was just 2 words, but the meaning it represented was enough to make any cultivator in the world tremble. You're right, but the more it's like this, the more it proves that I'm too useless. Ao Zhentian had recovered his calm at this moment, and he said bitterly, Look at Lin Sun. He's only cultivating in the ancient desolation domain, yet he's able to easily defeat me. If he was allowed to cultivate in the Starry Sky Ancient Path from the beginning, wouldn't the resources and combat strength he possesses be even more terrifying? As he spoke up to hear, he couldn't help but laugh at himself. In the past, I only set my eyes on those blazing suns on the Starry Sky True Sage list, but now I realize that I'm too narrow-minded. Yin Huan couldn't help but be slightly worried. Would Ao Zhentian be too shocked, and his invincible belief in his mental state wavered? Yin Huan, don't worry. This defeat has completely sobered me up, and I won't be so muddle-headed in the future. Ao Zhentian took a deep breath, and his brows were filled with determination. Yin Huan felt much more relaxed when she saw this. The only thing I'm worried about now is how to bring my cousin's sister back to the clan. You know that it was my grandfather who gave the order to come to the ancient desolation domain this time. If I can't accomplish this, my grandfather will definitely blame me. Ao Zhentian let out a long sigh. Yin Huan thought for a moment and said, How about I plead with Marshal Uncle Miao Xian and ask him to help persuade Lin Sun? Ao Zhentian shook his head. No, I'll go and find her myself. Let Yin Huan choose to bow her head because of him? Ao Zhentian couldn't do that. On the same night, a letter was brought back to the Divine Secret Pavilion from Star Chess Sea. Lin opened the letter and saw only a line of words on it. Your heart is also my heart. This matter is all up to you. Lin Sun read it and immediately understood. It seemed that Jing Xian was also very interested in the ancestral dragon blood, but she valued his attitude more, so she let him make the decision. Immediately, Lin Sun found Miao Xian and said, Senior, can you please tell Ao Zhentian that I'll make a decision after I return from the front line? Miao Xian laughed heartily, sure. When Miao Xian brought these words to Ao Zhentian, the latter was stunned. What did this guy mean? Yin Huan immediately understood and said, What else could it mean? He definitely doesn't feel at ease with you taking Miss Jing Xian away right now, but he doesn't want Miss Jing Xian to miss the opportunity of the 10,000 Dragons Immortal Gathering, so he made such a decision. Ao Zhentian couldn't help but snort. Does he think I will harm my cousin? Yin Huan shook her head and said, No, this only proves that the relationship between Lin Sun and Child Ao's cousin is not ordinary, and it is very likely that they have become Taoist companions. Ao Zhentian's pupil shrank and he said, Doesn't she know that our descendants, whether male or female, must get the consent of the patriarch and the elders if they want to become Taoist companions with outsiders? Yin Huan thought of something and couldn't help sighing. Ao Zhentian quickly said, Yin Huan, there is no problem between us. When the gathering of dragons comes to an end, I will ask my father for instructions as soon as possible. Yin Huan nodded with shyness and tenderness in her eyes. If Lin Sun was here, he would not believe that Yin Huan, an aloof and cold beauty, had such a shy and tender side. For a moment, Ao Zhentian couldn't help being stunned. The beauty was picturesque, poetic, and mellow. It could be tasted, appreciated, and recalled. In the end, Ao Zhentian agreed to wait for a while. The next morning, in a secret realm located deep within the divine secret pavilion, there was an ancient black altar. On one side of the altar stood a thin old man with sparse beard and hair. He wore a straw raincoat and a bamboo hat, like an old fisherman. When Miao Xian arrived with Lin Sun, he first bowed slightly to the old man in the straw raincoat and said, This young friend is Lin Sun. He wants to go to the front-line battlefield. Sorry to trouble you, Elder Yin. The old fisherman glanced at Lin Sun and nodded. He didn't say a word more. Miao Xian said to Lin Sun, This is Elder Yin. He will take you to the front-line battlefield along the way. Remember, no matter what happens along the way, you must listen to Elder Yin. Lin Sun nodded. Elder Yin's breath was very ordinary, and Lin Sun couldn't tell what cultivation he had. But the more ordinary he was, the more Lin Sun dared not to underestimate him. When you arrive at the front line, please hand this letter to my senior brother, my young friend. Miao Xian took out a sealed jade slip and handed it to Lin Sun. Lin Sun carefully put it away, and walked up to the ancient black altar with Elder Yin. Accompanied by a strange roar, Lin Sun and Elder Yin suddenly disappeared. Fortunately, Elder Yin is here. Otherwise, it's easy to have too many accidents just by moving in the void. Miao Xian let out a long breath. The scene in front of Lin Sun suddenly changed. Lin Sun suddenly had a feeling as if he was shuttling through countless colorful and broken worlds, and all the way there were strange and dazzling scenes. Beside him, Elder Yin was driving an old wooden boat, carrying Lin Sun shuttling in the void. Wisps of space turbulence turned into colorful ribbons, splashing around the wooden boat, magnificent and beautiful. But Lin Sun knew that once he was touched by those colorful ribbons, even if he was a peerless saint, he would be instantly smashed by the terrible power of space. Because they were moving in the void, the power of space was the power of rules of order between nothingness. Along the way, Elder Yin stood at the bow of the boat, stooped, wearing a straw cape and a bamboo hat, like a fisherman, silently looking into the distance without saying a word. Seeing this, Lin Sun didn't disturb him and looked around calmly. It was said that on the front-line battlefield of the ancient Desolation Realm, there was a great wall connecting heaven and earth. It was magnificent and vast, built by real stars. This city was also called Imperial Pass Long City. From ancient times to the present, it had blocked the invasion of countless foreign enemies and kept the peace of the ancient Desolation Realm until now. Both the inside and outside of the vast city walls were tainted with an endless amount of blood. This was rarely circulated in the ancient Desolation Realm. Lin Sun also learned some news about the frontline battlefield of the ancient Desolation Realm from Miao Xian. Chapter 1644. Woo woo! Suddenly, a scarlet ocean appeared in front of the wooden boat. It was as thick as blood, and a strange sound came from the depths of the sea. In an instant, Lin Sun felt a tingling in his eardrums. His qi and blood were boiling, and he saw stars. He exerted all his strength to dissolve the terrible sound. It was also at this moment that he clearly saw a golden dermic conch floating within the blood-colored wave. It was crying, and its voice wailed as it shook the sea to the point it rose and fell. Waves struck the heavens, and even the void was thrown into disorder and shattered. What's this? Lin Sun was surprised. Then, as the sound of the golden conch spread, the sky exploded, the scarlet sea rolled back, and endless storms were stirred up. Lin soon only felt that his body was trembling, his state of mind was in turmoil, and his cultivation showed signs of being reversed and disordered. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. He hurriedly concentrated his spirit and qi and ran his cultivation method. He was like a furnace in the sky, suppressing the ups and downs of the past and the present. Even so, he could barely resist the attack of the terrible sound wave. At this moment, Elder Een, who stood in front of the wooden boat, opened his mouth. His voice was dry and hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken for a long time. This is a Dharmic conch left behind by an Emperor Realm Buddha. Blow the Dharmic conch and hit the Dharmic drum to display the might of the Dharmic Tao. The louder the Dharmic conch, the stronger the Dharmic power. This conch has long been damaged and fallen. Otherwise, in the hands of an Emperor Realm expert, it is enough to make the sky fall, the earth crack, the river of stars tremble, and all things perish. As soon as Elder Yin's voice sounded, Lin soon felt relaxed, and the interference brought by the terrible sound wave disappeared without a trace. When he raised his eyes to look again, he noticed that the blood-red ocean was only an illusion, and even the golden shell was only a brand. For some unknown reason, its aura was still preserved even after experiencing the corrosion of countless years. What you saw just now was the remains of a battlefield in primitive times. It was sprinkled with Emperor Realm blood and turned into an ocean. However, after the passage of time, the battlefield has long disappeared, leaving only some aura to this day. Elder Een sighed softly. Lin soon couldn't help but gasp. How could some dying aura cause such terrible oppression and interference to him? It was incredible and terrible. You did well just now, and the self-cultivation method you created is quite unique, but it lacks some real tempering. Elder Een didn't say anything else after that. From the beginning to the end, he turned his back to Lin Sun and never looked back, but he seemed to have a panoramic view of Lin's performance. The wooden ship crushed the void as it moved forward, flying through space. It looked old, but it was not afraid of the invasion of the power of space rules. Not long after, the blood-colored ocean disappeared, and the void was filled with darkness. It was as if they were shuttling through the endless night. Arriving here, the wooden boat slowed down significantly. This is the land of destruction. It's a land of nothingness left behind after a world plane is destroyed. Such a place is also the most dangerous. Elder Een spoke again. As if to prove his words true, in the next moment, numerous gorgeous beams of light suddenly soared up from the dark void. Shockingly, it was strand after strand of sword qi. They tore apart the darkness, tore apart the sky, illuminated eternally, and were filled with an eternal and peerless sharpness. At this moment, Elder Een finally moved. With a wave of his sleeve, the wooden boat quickly dodged, flashing endlessly far away, avoiding this land of sword qi. Even so, there was still a strand of sword qi that brushed past the wooden boat. In that instant, Lin soon felt as if he was on the verge of death, as if he had fallen into an icy cave. This sword qi simply couldn't be found in this world. It was too terrifying to the point that Lin soon couldn't understand it at all. A very long time ago, this land of destruction had once taken the life of a sword emperor. After he died, the sword intent contained within his corpse was everlasting, and every time an external object approached it, it would surge out. Only when they were far away from that dangerous place did Elder Een speak. The sword emperor died here. Lin Sun was shocked again. The road to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass was filled with so many bloody, shocking, and terrifying things. This was something Lin Sun had never imagined before. If it wasn't for Elder Een leading the way, there was no need to even think about it. With his current cultivation, it would be impossible for him to take even a single step into this place. Elder Een suddenly said, "I observed the method you created. It contains the profundities of Sword Tao. This strand of sword chi was collected by me just now. Take it and study it. Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of 3-inch sword chi appeared in front of Lin Sun. It was sparkling and translucent, flickering with a peerless sharpness. Just looking at it made one's heart tremble. Without a doubt, this was the sword chi left behind by the fallen sword emperor. Many thanks, Senior. Lin Sun acted as if he had obtained a supreme treasure. Only, when he tried to seize it, this 3-inch sword chi seemed to be unyielding. With a light flash, it shattered Lin Sun's force. The sharpness of its sharpness almost injured Lin Sun. Elder Een seemed to be completely unaware of this and didn't pay any attention to it. Lin Sun took a deep breath and operated the Great Way Furnace method. The image of a furnace soared into the air, enveloping the 3-inch sword chi within. Bang bang bang! In an instant, the sword chi danced about chaotically, rampaging about and almost collapsing the furnace image. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and performed his own method with all his strength. Confronting the sword chi was like staging a thrilling battle. Just a moment later, Lin Sun looked solemn. This sword chi was so powerful that fighting against it was like fighting against a peerless swordsman. It was incredibly terrible. With Lin Sun's current combat strength, killing a peerless sage was no different from tearing a painting. But it was extremely difficult for him to fight against this 3-inch sword chi. After a long time, Lin Sun coughed up blood. However, at this time, the 3-inch sword chi suddenly exploded and turned into broken sword chi dust, which was smelted in the furnace. Without hesitation, Lin Sun sat cross-legged and meditated. In an instant, countless mysterious insights of sword Tao came into his mind, making him forget himself. At the bow, Elder Een showed a trace of surprise, but soon recovered. No one knew better than him that it was extremely difficult to subdue this sword chi, even for a great sage. But Lin Sun did it with the power of a true sage. Elder Een thought of Miao Xian's evaluation of Lin Sun. I haven't seen such a person for thousands of years. He's like a demon and an immortal. After a long time, Lin Sun, who was sitting cross-legged on the boat, suddenly opened his eyes and moved his mind. The image of a furnace floated up into appearance, and then it transformed into 33 layers of sword chi in the blink of an eye. Every single layer of sword chi converged 18,000 swords, and every single sword surged with sword insight. The sharp aura was brilliant and vast, and when it surged in space, it just happened to rise and fall like an ocean of sword insight. Clatter as Lin Sun ran the method, the ocean of sword chi began to develop various sword formations in the void, which were magnificent and formed a world of its own. Later, with a wave of swords, all the methods were absorbed into Lin Sun's body. The sword chi was formed. To practice Taishien's Sword Sutra was to cultivate wisps of sword chi in each acupoint, so that they could quench sword light, gather sword chi, condense sword soul, and turn into sword spirit. Now, Lin Sun gathered all his Taishien's sword chi into an immortal and sharp sword chi. While the quality of Taishien's sword chi was upgraded, the power of Taishien's sword chi also underwent a qualitative transformation, and Taishien's sword chi was originally integrated into Lin Sun's Great Way Furnace Sutra, which improved the power of this sutra imperceptibly. All of this was the benefit that came from refining the 3-inch long sword chi. Using the method of the ancients and replacing it with one's own method, this method is too amazing. I've never heard of it. At this moment, Elder Een spoke with a hint of seriousness in his voice. My young friend, when you practice in the future, you must not easily reveal your own method. Otherwise, it will be a disaster rather than a blessing. Lin Sun was shocked and nodded. Thank you for your advice, Elder Een. In the following period of time, the wooden boat traveled in the void, experiencing many strange and dangerous things on the way. Countless stars and meteorites fell from the chaotic starry sky, whistling down and sinking pieces of barren and withered world fragments. terrible storms of the Great Way raged like the end of the world, sweeping through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, crushing the sun and the moon in it. Broken emperor skeletons and corpses rushed up, emitting an aura that could make heaven and earth collapse. There were too many incredible and horrible scenes appeared, some of which were residual illusions, and some were real strange things. Along the way, Lin Sun was frightened from time to time and broke out in a cold sweat. If it weren't for Elder Een leading the way, Lin Sun would definitely turn around and retreat without hesitation. From the beginning to the end, he never thought that there would be such a terrible thing on the way to the front battlefield. Especially on one occasion, when they passed through an expanse of gray and hazy starry sky, an ethereal figure suddenly appeared. It stood towering between the heavens and the earth, and merely its aura penetrated the surroundings and caused countless stars to trickle down like rain. At that time, Lin Sun was completely shocked and stunned. There was no need for Elder Een to explain at all. He knew that it was the power of an emperor. Even if he had fallen for countless years, the remaining aura still had the power to crush the sky. The emperor was high. The more he looked up at it, the stronger he was. The more he studied it, the more he felt that it was the power of an emperor. The more people looked up at it, the more they felt it was lofty. The more they studied it, the more they felt it was infinite. They wanted to catch up, but they couldn't catch up with it no matter what. It was not an exaggeration to look up to the heavens, control the universe, and be the first of all saints. Although the road seemed long for Lin Sun, it was like opening a new door, which made him realize many things, all of which were rare and precious experiences. Along the way, Elder Een occasionally gave some advice and explanations to Lin Sun. Although he didn't say much, Lin Sun always felt enlightened and enlightened. Influenced by the improvement of his state of mind, vision, and experience, his cultivation became more stable and solid, and there were signs of approaching the consummation of the true sage realm. This was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise. After returning from the 9 regions battlefield, Lin Sun's cultivation broke through to the late stage of true sage realm when he obtained the luck of the Great Way on the Immortal Mountain. Now, his cultivation showed signs of approaching the consummation. It could be imagined how much benefit the experience and insight along the way had brought to Lin Sun. Chapter 1645. The old wooden ship shuttled through the void. Elder Een was as silent as ever. But Lin Sun knew that Elder Een was definitely not inferior to Miao Xian, or even more powerful, because there were many dangers along the way, and there was no lack of breath left by some emperors, which could easily kill any saints. But Elder Een could always turn misfortune into blessing. How could an ordinary person do this? One day, when Lin Sun was deducing and practicing the Great Way's furnace scripture, he suddenly noticed that the wooden ship passed by a graveyard in the starry sky. Numerous tombs floated in the starry sky like meteors, and every single one of them emitted a strange and unfathomable aura. It was as if ancient fiend gods were buried within them. On one of the tombs there was a blood mosquito, which was about 300 meters in size. Its body was as red as blood, as if it was made of divine gold, and it emitted a ghastly chill. Its eyes were like a pair of bloody lanterns, and there were 16 wings on its back. Each pair of wings was branded with dense and strange characters of the underworld, which were ferocious and treacherous. Looking from afar, one could feel a frightening and ferocious breath, as if they were looking at a peerless, evil god. It was lying on a kind of tomb, and its sharp mouth was inserted into the tomb. Its 16 pairs of wings trembled slightly, as if it was absorbing some kind of power. It looked extremely strange. Underworld child? Lin Sun's black eyes shrank, and he almost couldn't believe his eyes. In the upper 9 realms of the domain of despair, Underworld child, an ancient freak who had been sleeping in the forbidden land of Styx, woke up and showed his disdainful power. Lin Sun had fought with it more than once, so he was very clear that its original body was the peerless 8-winged blood mosquito, which was born in the Styx. This kind of monster was born and raised by the earth, and it had incredible fierce talent. Moreover, its vitality was so strong that it was almost immortal. Lin Sun had fought with it several times and killed it completely several times. But every time, Underworld Child came back to life with the help of the Emperor of Hell's smelting pot. Until the last time he killed Underworld Child, Lin Sun was very sure that his soul was completely shattered. But in the end, Underworld Child's broken flesh and blood was saved by the mysterious Emperor of Hell's smelting pot. At that time, even Lin Sun was not sure whether he could be resurrected. Could the gigantic and ferocious blood mosquito in front of him be him? When Lin Sun wanted to take a closer look, the wooden boat had already passed through the starry graveyard, and the blood mosquito could no longer be seen. But Lin Sun couldn't calm down. Back then, the Dark Child had 8 pairs of wings and had the cultivation of a king of the longevity tribulation realm. The blood mosquito they had seen before had 16 pairs of wings. If it really is the Dark Child, why would he appear here? That's a 16-winged Nether River blood mosquito. The one who possesses such a bloodline talent should be an emperor from the underworld. As far as I know, the true form of the dark blood underworld emperor, who went to the ancient path of the stars in the primordial era, was such a ferocious creature. Elder Een spoke from the front of the wooden boat. He seemed to have noticed something wrong with Lin Sun's mood. "Senior, do you know what the blood mosquito was doing just now?" Lin Sun asked with a thought. A rare trace of disgust appeared in Elder Yin's voice. He said, "Absorbing the remnant souls and blood of ancient heroic spirits to cultivate, using this to promote one's own transformation. It's like a bloodthirsty mosquito, abhorrent by ghosts and gods." Lin Sun couldn't help but feel disgusted. Buried under the starry graveyard were the corpses of countless powerhouses. Yet the Nether River blood mosquito cultivated with the remnant souls and blood of these ancient corpses, which naturally made people feel uncomfortable. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the old wooden boat suddenly stopped in the void. Elder Een said, "The Great Wall of Imperial Pass, we've arrived." Lin Sun suddenly raised his head. Far away in the distance, a black line stretched across the heavens and the earth. It was so vast that it seemed to be boundlessly long. It was so huge that no one could see its height and distance. But looking carefully, one could tell that it was a great wall winding between heaven and earth. It was incomparably vast, incomparably majestic, covering the sky and earth. Just looking at it from afar made one feel insignificant, because this city was too vast. Around the city, there were stars revolving one after another, as if they were eternal. It had been like this since ancient times. Grand, magnificent, majestic. Even the stars could only revolve around the city's surroundings. Just how massive was this? This city was built by a group of emperors gathering stars from outer space. It stretches between heaven and earth like an eternal wall, blocking outside enemies. Elder Yin's hoarse voice carried a deep sigh. The ancient wasteland's first heavenly moat, the place where venerable emperors stopped, these are definitely not empty words. Lin Sun's mind rose and fell. Since ancient times until now, this city had towered without decaying, like a heavenly moat, stopping all outside enemies. If this was the case, didn't this city lead to the other 8 regions' worlds? "You can move out now," Elder Een said. "When you return, just have Mr. Shin send you on your way." Lin Sun immediately became clear-headed. He bowed respectfully and said, "Many thanks to Senior for looking after me along the way." Elder Een nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, a wave of formless force spread, wrapping around Lin Sun and bringing him away from the wooden boat. When he returned to his senses, Lin Sun already appeared in front of Imperial Pass Great Wall. When he turned around, Elder Yin's figure had long disappeared. Lin Sun shook his head. He didn't think too much about it and continued forward. The closer he got to this city, the more insignificant he felt, as if he was an ant gazing into the heavens. The disparity was too great. Moreover, as he got closer, Lin soon felt a tremendous pressure, his mind even trembling. It was as if there were many emperor-level existences standing on top of Imperial Pass Great Wall, overlooking the world. This city really was too grand and majestic. When he got closer, it was full of scenes of heaven and earth being created. Chaotic mist pervaded the air, stars swirling about. It was incomparable. Lin soon savored it for a bit, and then he immediately understood. This city was covered in unmatched restrictions, suffused with the aura of emperor level, dominating the world. This was Imperial Pass Great Wall, existing since time immemorial, dominating the front lines. Little kid, who sent you here? Simply messing around, do you want to die? Suddenly, a muffled thunderous shout sounded from that towering and enormous city. Boom! In the next moment, wind and thunder surged, the void in disorder. Not far from Lin Sun, a man in green armor with unkempt hair and beard suddenly appeared. He had a resolute face, his entire body exuding a terrifying iron-blooded aura. Around him, a rain of great Tao light surged like a waterfall. Just by standing there casually, Lin Sun felt suffocated, as if he was looking up at a great mountain. This was a quasi-emperor-level figure who had fought on the battlefield for a long time. Lin Sun instantly judged, immediately bowing and saying, "Junior Lin Sun greets Senior." The resolute middle-aged man's eyes were brilliant, like divine swords shooting out. He swept his gaze over Lin Sun and then said, "I am this city's gatekeeper, Shunji. Little kid, tell me, who sent you here? This is the front line's battlefield. Didn't your elders tell you that with your cultivation, coming here is purely courting death?" Shunji's words were extremely impolite. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, "This time, Junior borrowed the power of Divine's secret pavilion to come here. My goal is to see Mr. Shun about something. I hope Senior can help me." When he heard the 3 words Divine's secret pavilion, Shunji's expression eased up quite a bit, but he still felt strange, saying, "What matter, to have a junior like you come here? Aren't you afraid of encountering mishaps?" Without waiting for Lin Sun's reply, he shook his head and said, "Forget it, since you have arrived safely, then follow me into the city first. Mr. Shun is not here right now, but in another stronghold, planning a strategy to defend against the enemy." As he spoke, Shunji waved his sleeves, rising into the air with Lin Sun. With a flash, they disappeared into thin air. The next moment, the two already appeared in Imperial Pass main city. This place was similarly vast and unimaginably vast. One could see giant star remains and meteorites floating in different areas, like giant islands in the void. Swish! As soon as they appeared, there were incomparably powerful and terrifying divine senses sweeping over, making Lin Sun's entire body stiffen, a chill running down his back. Without a doubt, these were the experts stationed in Imperial Pass main city. "How do you feel?" Shunji grinned, his rough and resolute expression carrying a trace of ridicule. "Those fellows stationed here all year round, there is not a single one whose cultivation is lower than the Saint King realm." Lin Sun's expression stiffened, and he sighed, "The Great Wall of Imperial Pass really deserves its reputation. Did you hear that? The little guy also knows how powerful the front line of the border pass is. If you continue like this, you will scare him." Shunji laughed loudly. Immediately, the terrifying thoughts that swept over all receded like the tide. Only then did Lin Sun feel a sense of relief. Just now, being locked on by so many terrifying thoughts, that feeling was not at all pleasant. "Let's go, I will take you to Mr. Shun's living place first." Shunji floated to the ground, leading Lin Sun forward. A golden light spread out, stepping on it at an extremely fast speed. Along the way, Lin Sun noticed that on the giant star remains floating in the void, there were some figures sitting cross-legged, silent, eyebrows, beards, and hair hanging down like waterfalls, their bodies covered in dust, who knew how many years they had been meditating. Suddenly Lin Sun's eyes widened. He saw something. A fiery red bird opened its mouth and inhaled, swallowing a star, letting out a clear and melodious cry. Not long after, Lin Sun's heart shook again. He saw a dwarf-like short old man dragging a corpse that was tens of thousands of zhang tall, proudly treading on the air. The dwarf old man ran while shouting, "Big guy, look, look, this is my achievement today, a giant barbarian blood quasi-emperor." Lin Sun was dumbfounded, hunting quasi-emperors. This dwarf old man was actually so fierce? On the side, Shun Ji snorted coldly, "Don't pay attention to this old thing, coming to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass for more than 7,000 years, killing less than 30 quasi-emperor enemies, can only be said to be weak." Lin Sun was directly speechless. An existence that could kill a quasi-emperor was actually described as weak. Suddenly, a wisp of sorrowful weeping sounded. In the distant area, chaotic chi pervaded, countless snow-white lightning flowing within. Vaguely, within the chaotic lightning, there was a slender white figure faintly visible, like a ghost immortal descending to the mortal world. Chapter 1646. Chaos filled the air, and snow-white lightning flashed silently. That sorrowful weeping voice came from the ghostly immortal-like white figure. Lin Sun's scalp was numb, and his state of mind was about to collapse. The cry, with a strange sad power, went straight to the mind, like a sudden cold arrow, trying to pierce the state of mind. "Let's go." Shun Ji grabbed Lin Sun and took a detour. Until the strange chaotic scene could no longer be seen, Shun Ji said with a complicated expression, "According to legend, it was a strand of the heroic spirit of a supreme existence in the primeval times. He was an emperor when he was still alive, and he possessed extraordinary accomplishments. His combat strength shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. He'd once slaughtered his way into the 8 regions by himself, and he slaughtered his enemies to the point all of them were terrified and their expressions changed at the mention of it. Although it was only a legend, it was still shocking. How unparalleled was his combat power to be able to run unhindered in the 8 regions. Unfortunately, in primitive times, the battle of emperors outside the Imperial Pass was unprecedentedly fierce. In the end, this emperor withered under the siege of the enemy due to physical exhaustion. When he died, his only regret was that he couldn't see his wife again. Now, his heroic spirit lingers here. Countless years have passed, but his heroic spirit hasn't been extinguished, and he still weeps with sorrow. Speaking of this, Shun Ji sighed again. In primitive times, the battle was earth-shaking. The ancient Desolation region was besieged by the 8 regions. The emperor tried his best, but in the end, he couldn't avoid death. Whenever this matter was mentioned, people would sigh with regret. Lin Sun was in a daze, and his mind was in turmoil. After a long time, he murmured, "This senior is really a sentimental person." Alas, isn't that so? Since ancient times, love has only led to regret. Who would dare imagine that this was the strongest emperor of the Devil Dao during the primeval times? He was renowned for being cold and emotionless, and he was called the Heartless Devil Emperor. Shun Ji sighed. Heartless Demon Emperor. Lin Sun firmly remembered this name. A demonic emperor, known for his ruthlessness and coldness, only regretted that he couldn't see his wife once before he died. Not long after, Shun Ji led Lin Sun into a fairyland-like area. Here, immortal clouds were rising, ancient palaces were lined up, and thousands of divine lights fell from the sky, bright and gorgeous. Shun Ji stopped in front of a bronze palace and said, "This is where Mr. Shin lives, you can just wait here." Lin asked, "Senior, when will Mr. Shin come back?" Shun Ji thought for a while, then shook his head and said, "It's hard to say. In recent years, the 8 territories have been invaded by foreign enemies, especially the 37th stronghold, Songhai Pass. The battle is the fiercest. Mr. Shun and the others are now stationed at Songhai Pass." Only after hearing Shun Ji's explanation did Lin Sun learn that Imperial Pass Great Wall stretched on endlessly, crossing who knew how many void worlds. Therefore, it was also divided into 108 strongholds, and every stronghold had a pass. Just the distance between each pass was very likely to be a few worlds apart. If one wanted to cross over, they would have to rely on special teleportation arrays. For example, Songhai Pass was separated by dozens of passes from the Yang Pass where Lin Sun and the others were. The distance was unimaginably far. Only when something big enough to affect the frontline battle situation happens can the Emperor's breath beacon fire be ignited, and the news can be transmitted to every pass in an instant. Little guy, if your matter is not urgent, I advise you to wait. Emperor's breath beacon fire cannot be used indiscriminately. Shunji said. Lin Sun thought for a while, then agreed. He came here only because he was entrusted by the Golden Cicada youth to bring that ice and snow leaf. It was not a big deal. From this day on, Lin Sun stayed at Mr. Shin's residence in Yang Pass, waiting for Mr. Shin to return. Yang Pass was extremely large. It was called a stronghold of Imperial Pass Great Wall, but in fact it was a continuous city, lying between three broken floating worlds. There were more than 30 quasi-emperors stationed here. In addition, there were hundreds of Saint Kings scattered here. When there was no battle, these old monsters who could shake the entire ancient desolation region with a stamp of their feet were either cultivating or doing their own things. Towards Lin Sun's arrival, even though there were quite a few curious gazes, as time went on, no one paid attention to this little fella anymore. Lin Sun was also happy to be idle. This was the first time he came to Imperial Pass Great Wall, so he would occasionally stroll around, looking at the great deeds of the ancients. However, most of the time, he was seizing the time to cultivate. Now, his chi refinement, body refinement, and spirit refinement, these three types of cultivation had long merged into one. His cultivation had also reached the consummate level of the true sage realm. The next step was the great sage realm. The great sage was precious in the word great. Great and immeasurable, formless and invisible, great sounds silent. From ancient times until now, regardless of what race, regardless of what language, all great characters were formed from one and person. This one was precisely the one that escaped from Heaven's Divination 50. This one that ran through the person body was great, implying that the great Tao was in the human heart. The great sage realm was when one's cultivation in the true sage realm transformed to a type of great Tao in the heart, one's body immeasurable state. Heaven and earth had great beauty without words, one's body had the great Tao and immeasurable. And now, Lin Sun was only a step away from this great sage realm. A single step was like ascending to the heavens, possessing immeasurable might. If one couldn't take that step, they could only remain in the true sage realm for the rest of their lives, unable to advance an inch. This was a threshold that was like a heavenly moat. For Lin Sun, the most pressing matter at hand was to research and ponder how to break through, how to reach the peak of the Tao path, and become a great sage. However, he also knew that he couldn't be impatient. Seeking the true sage realm, every step was difficult. He had just reached the peak of the true sage realm 3 years ago. This type of cultivation speed could already be said to be world-shocking. Moreover, advancing to the next realm was definitely not something that could be achieved through diligent cultivation. He also needed the opportunity to comprehend the Tao, the opportunity to advance, and the great willpower to sharpen his body like grinding and sharpening. The Bronze Palace was grand and quiet. When one was inside, it was as if they were isolated from the world, making one completely unaware of the passage of time. That day, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. After calculating the time, half a month had already passed, but there was still no news of Mr. Shin not returning. With a light sigh, Lin Sun stood up, walking towards the outside of the palace. The sky was dim, great stars rising and falling one after another. The shattered star remains turning into giant rocks that were like continents, floating in the void. Lin Sun walked forward. During these days, He had already familiarized himself with everything in Imperial Pass, not as restrained as he was in the beginning. Those old monsters stationed here almost didn't have the mind to pay attention to a small figure like him. In the distance, a wave of noisy laughter suddenly sounded. In this cold and austere Imperial Pass Great Wall, it was quite eye-catching. Lin Sun stared blankly, couldn't help but approach. In the distance, a verdant hill filled with a divine aura appeared, waterfalls and flowing springs, multicolored lights swirling about. A group of figures were currently surrounding a piece of flat land in front of the verdant hill. There were men and women, old and young. Every single one of their auras had already been restrained, but even so, it still made one feel incomparably pressured. It was like a group of lions. Even if their claws and teeth were restrained, they were still lions after all. That kind of aura was enough to intimidate all beasts. This was a group of quasi-emperors in Yang Pass. There were also quite a few Saint Kings. In the place they surrounded, there were two people currently playing chess. One was an old man with an iron crown on his head, his figure as thin as a pine tree, his bearing like that of an immortal. He wore a black Taoist robe, his bearing calm. Lin soon recognized the other party. He was called Ling Xiaozi, a quasi-emperor, a spirit tattoo grandmaster himself, a rather famous old monster in this Yang Pass. He had already been stationed in Imperial Pass Great Wall for 8,000 years. On the other side of Ling Xiaozi was Shun Ji. This rough and resolute-looking, heroic quasi-emperor figure, at this moment, was flushed red to the ears, scratching his ears and cheeks, as if he was suffering from constipation. His eyes were fixed on the chessboard on the ground, as if he had encountered a great problem. Ling Xiaozi smiled slightly, as if victory was already in his grasp. The other quasi-emperors nearby had already begun to roar with laughter. Shunji, admit defeat. With your lousy chess skills, you still want to win against Ling Xiaozi in the 9 Palace chess? You're obviously looking for trouble. Hurry up, don't waste time, admit defeat. Everyone will divide the bet. Those quasi-emperors were either ridiculing or ridiculing. Old Shun, can you do it? I've bet 3 healing medicines on you, waiting for you to turn the tables and make a good profit. There were also people who were flustered and exasperated, looking anxious. This game of chess between Shun Ji and Ling Xiaozi was also a gambling game, and those nearby old monsters were all involved. But it was obvious that there were many people betting on Ling Xiaozi, and few people betting on Shun Ji. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be speechless. Perhaps these old monsters had been fighting here for too long, and had been lonely for too long. It was just a game of chess, but they had actually treated it as a gambling game for fun. Lin Sun walked forward, and saw the so-called 9 Palace chess. A 9 Palace diagram refined from animal skin was spread out on the ground, and in each of the 9 palaces, there was a blank world. During the game of chess, it was in these blank worlds that a Tao pattern forbidden formation was laid out to determine the outcome of the game. For example, if it was Shun Ji who laid out the formation in the Palace of Qian, then Ling Xiaozi would have to break the formation, and if he could not, then Shun Ji would win the game. Then, Ling Xiaozi would lay out the formation in the Palace of Kun, and Shun Ji would break the formation, and so on. The one who succeeded in breaking the formation would win the game. If he failed, it would mean that he had lost the game. On the 9 Palace diagram, there were a total of 9 palaces, representing 9 blank worlds. During the game of chess, it would also be played 9 times, and the final result would be determined. This was the 9 Palace chess. What they were competing on was actually the attainments of Tao patterns. Lin Sun saw that Shun Ji had lost 5 games in a row, and Ling Xiaozi had not lost a single game. There was no need to continue, Shun Ji had already lost. However, according to the rules, if Shun Ji insisted on playing to the end, no one could stop him. Chapter 1647. Shun Ji's eyes were wide open, breathing heavily, staring at the 9 Palace map without saying a word. In this game of chess, He had bet a quasi-emperor treasure seized from the battlefield. It was rare that it was intact and extremely rare. If he lost, this treasure would no longer belong to him. Old Shun, just admit defeat. I've already advised you countless times, this old fellow Ling Zhao's 9 profound divine marrow serum isn't that easy to win against. Mysterious divine marrow serum is a first-class treasure in the heavens. Although it is of little use to us quasi-emperors, it can play the magical effect of refining the Taoist foundation and tempering the state of mind in the great saint realm. Every drop is a priceless treasure. Old Shun, everyone knows that you want to seek a blessing for your grandson, but this kind of thing can't be forced. The nearby quasi-emperors began to persuade him. Senior, you really have no chance of winning this game. Lin Sun also couldn't help speaking. Shun Ji raised his head, glaring at him, and said angrily, Motherf *Ker, it's not enough for you to see me make a fool of myself, you also come to persuade me to admit defeat, don't you have a conscience? Lin Sun was just about to say something, when Shun Ji let out a long sigh. Fine, fine, I admit defeat, you old things can divide the bet. The quasi-emperors burst into laughter, and began to divide the bet with Ling Xiao. And the old monsters who bet on Shun Ji all looked at each other in dismay, extremely depressed. Shun Ji frowned. Don't look so sad, when I come back, I promise to kill Ling Xiao until he wets his pants and cries for his parents. Those old monsters all rolled their eyes as if saying, whoever still believes in this lousy chess basket of yours is an idiot. Shun Ji also looked embarrassed. Over the years, every time he played against Ling Xiao, he would lose completely, which really looked very humiliating. But, when Shun Ji was about to leave, he suddenly heard a voice. I wonder if I can play a game with Senior. It was Lin Sun, who came straight to the opposite of Ling Xiao and asked with cupped hands. The old monsters who had divided up the spoils and were about to leave with joy were obviously stunned at this time. This kid actually wants to play chess with Ling Xiao? In this Imperial Pass Great Wall, who didn't know that Ling Xiaozi, this old fella, didn't have any other skills? Only in the Tao of Tao patterns could he surpass his peers, show disdain for all? Old Shun, you were the one who brought this kid into the city, right? A newborn calf is truly not afraid of a tiger. Haha, no matter what, his courage is commendable. Someone laughed, disapproving of this. Commendable courage? I think he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Someone frowned and said, You're already at the saint realm, yet you're still so rash. You'll definitely cause a huge mess in the future. Forget it, who hasn't been young before? You old fellows can't lower yourselves to bicker with a junior. Someone tried to smooth things over. In short, although these old monsters were surprised and puzzled, they didn't show any malice. Old Shun, quickly bring this child away. It will not be too late for him to play with Ling Xiaozi after he becomes a quasi-emperor. Someone said with a smile. Shun Ji was also stunned for a while, then immediately pointed to Lin Sun, shook his head and laughed. Why are you making trouble at this time? Go, let's get out of here quickly, lest we be ridiculed by these old things. As he said, he was about to grab Lin Sun's shoulder. From beginning to end, Ling Xiaozi sat there cross-legged, smiling slightly, leisurely. With his identity, he wouldn't argue with a junior like Lin Sun. Senior, don't you want 9 mysterious divine marrow serum? But at this moment, Lin Sun's words made Shun Ji's movements stop abruptly. He widened his eyes and said, Boy, what did you say? Without thinking, Lin Sun said casually, I said, I can give it a try and help you win some 9 mysterious divine marrow serum. He was very interested in the 9 Palaces game, and felt a sense of eagerness to hunt. After all, this was a kind of contest of Tao patterns, a way he had been exposed to since he was a child, and had long been integrated into his blood. When? Shun Ji almost couldn't believe his ears. If it weren't for Lin Sun's calm expression, he would have the impulse to flick his sleeves and leave. What a joke! Even he was no match for Ling Xiaozi. How could a junior like Lin Sun compete with Ling Xiaozi? It was no exaggeration to say that inside and outside the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, no one who could win Ling Xiaozi in the Nine Palaces game had yet to appear. The other old monsters nearby also had strange expressions, which was no different from Shun Ji's feelings. If before, their evaluation of Lin Sun was that he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, now it was that he didn't know when to advance or retreat, and didn't know what was good for him. With the status of the people present, they naturally wouldn't embarrass a junior, but if this junior didn't know when to advance or retreat, it would be very unpleasant. "Young man, are you sure you want to play?" Someone couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun nodded, of course. Seeing this, many big shots couldn't help but frown. This kid really wouldn't shed a tear until he saw the coffin. "Then do you know that you have to pay a price to play against Ling Xiaozi?" A beautiful and charming woman in violet clothes said in a soft voice, "Just like Shun Ji, he just took out a treasure as a wager. If he wins, he can obtain the 9 profound divine marrow nectar, and if he loses, this treasure will belong to Ling Xiaozi." After a pause, the woman in purple said, "I see that you are about the same age as my grandson, and your character is not bad. As an elder, I advise you not to be impulsive. It doesn't matter if you lose, but if you lose the treasure, it won't be worth it." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, "Senior, don't worry, I have a sense of propriety." Seeing this, the woman in purple immediately lost interest and stopped persuading him. Someone sneered and said, "Since you want to play chess, then take out a treasure and let everyone see if you have the qualifications to play chess with Ling Xiaozi." Lin Sun nodded painfully. He turned over his palm, and a divine medicine appeared. It was golden all over, with 8 leaves of different colors. Each leaf reflected a kind of vivid spiritual body, such as a red Kailan, a blue Pishio, a cyan Luan, and a purple Swanee. A total of 8 kinds of spiritual images surrounded a golden ginseng. The light rain was drifting, and the medicinal fragrance was so strong that it seemed to penetrate people's marrow. 8 spirit ginseng. This medicine was picked by Lin Sun from the battlefield of flying immortals. Like Night Jade Rattan, it was also a first-class natural treasure in the world. All of a sudden, all the old monsters showed different expressions, and their eyes lit up. What a treasure! With their cultivation and experience, they naturally judged in an instant that the rarity and preciousness of this medicine was absolutely not inferior to 9 mysterious divine marrow syrup. "I didn't expect this kid to have such a treasure," someone murmured in surprise. There were also people with fiery eyes who shouted, "Enough, enough! Ling Xiaozi, the treasures this brat took out are enough to play a game with you. I'll place my bet first. I'll bet on this 8 Spirit King ginseng." Other old monsters were also a little tempted. It was not that they didn't see the world, nor did they want to compete for the things of a younger generation. It was really that this treasure was too rare. Ling Xiaozi's eyes flashed, and he finally nodded slightly, "Okay." However, Shun Ji was very anxious and said, "Boy, don't. Once you lose this treasure, you can never get it back. Listen to me, don't play with these old monsters. They can't wait for you to lose this treasure." Lin Sun said with a smile, "Senior, it's just a divine medicine. What's more, we haven't played a game yet. How do you know I will lose?" Although the old monsters were quite enthusiastic about 8 Spirit Ginseng, they couldn't help frowning when they heard Lin Sun's words. This kid was really arrogant. At this time, Lin Sun had sat cross-legged on the ground, put 8 Spirit Ginseng aside, and looked at Ling Xiaozi calmly. "Senior, please enlighten me." Seeing this, Shun Ji sighed, knowing that he couldn't persuade this stubborn little guy. Ling Xiao said indifferently, "Young man, if you have the heart to delve into the Tao of Spirit Runes, this old man can give you some pointers in your free time, lest you walk down the wrong path. But a chess match between the 9 palaces is different. Since it's a chess match, it should naturally be fair. This old man will definitely not show any mercy. Have you considered it clearly?" These words were like the demeanor of a master. Lin Sun didn't even think about it. He nodded and said, "Sure." Ling Xiaozi furrowed his brows and said with a light sigh, "Fine, this old man will bully the weak and accompany you in a game of chess." Wait for us to bet first," a quasi-emperor shouted, and then he took out a magic sword shining with immortal light. "I bet on Ling Xiaozi to win." Seeing this, other people also placed their bets, and almost all of them bet on Ling Xiaozi to win. "Alas, you really give me a headache," Shunji said with a sad face. Shunji frowned. Although he said so, he bet a treasure on Lin Sun. This made Lin Sun startled, but he smiled and said nothing more. "I also bet on this little friend to win." To everyone's surprise, the beautiful woman in purple also took out a treasure. "Take it as some encouragement for my little friend." Lin Sun cupped his hands, but remembered this kindness in his heart. Soon, there were many treasures piled up in the field, all of which were of extraordinary quality, shining brilliantly. How could the treasures taken out by quasi-emperors and king of sages be ordinary? If this scene was seen by other true saints, they would be dumbfounded. Could be called a big gamble. But for those old monsters present, it could only be said to be a small gamble to liven things up. What's more, they already had victory in their hearts. They thought that even if Ling Xiaozi went easy on Lin Sun, he would definitely make Lin Sun retreat and admit defeat. However, Lin Sun glanced at these treasures and said thoughtfully, "Seniors, I have a presumptuous request. If I win, I don't want these treasures, as long as you can impart to me the experience of breaking through to the great saint realm." Everyone was stunned at first, and then their expressions became more and more strange. This kid actually thought he could win? Hearing this, Ling Xiaozi couldn't help but snort coldly. At such a young age, Lin Sun was so arrogant. It was obvious that he didn't take himself seriously. "Okay, I promise you." A big shot promised with a hint of sarcasm, "I'd like to see how you will win." Others also agreed one after another. It was just some experience of breaking through to the great saint realm, which had nothing to do with inheritance, so they didn't mind taking it out. However, they didn't think that Lin Sun could really win. Chapter 1648. "Young friend, please." Ling Xiaozi's expression had already calmed down, and he had the demeanor of a grandmaster. "Okay." Lin Sun nodded. After a moment's thought, he picked up a chess piece and placed it on the Qian Palace. This chess piece was called Mountain River Seed. It was refined with a secret method and contained profound principles. With a single thought, one could brand the Taoist forbidden formation he had conceived on it. As Lin Sun placed the chess piece, the blank world on the Qian Palace was suddenly covered by a Taoist forbidden formation. It seemed to be only the size of a fist, but in fact it could accommodate a large forbidden formation. This was the magical effect of the law of space. At the Saint King level, one could already grasp the power of the space field, and they could also refine mountains and rivers within the palm of their hand. For quasi-emperors, it was even less difficult to grasp the mysteries of space. This beast-hide 9-palace diagram was a spatial treasure. Small firmament forbidden formation. The old monsters present instantly recognized the formation Lin Sun had set up and couldn't help shaking their heads. This kind of forbidden formation was too ordinary. Forget about Ling Xiaozi, even if they made a move, they could easily break it. This boy is really young. Many people found it funny, and they became more and more certain that Lin Sun would lose. "Boy, what kind of lousy chess piece is this?" Shunji was anxious. This formation was too ordinary and simply too weak. It was completely a pipe dream to want to win against Ling Xiaozi with this kind of trick. "Senior, a true gentleman does not speak when watching chess." Lin Sun was very calm and unperturbed. Shunji glared at Lin Sun, and finally sighed helplessly. It was over. This time not only would he lose, but even this boy would lose the 8 spiritual treasure ginseng. It was a great disgrace. Ling Xiaozi's expression was calm, without any mockery or contempt. He picked up a chess piece, and with a single thought, the method to break the formation poured into the chess piece. But when the chess piece fell, the formation Lin Sun had set up in the Qian Palace instantly collapsed and disappeared without a trace. Lin Sun lost the first game without any suspense. Ling Xiaozi said, "Young man, it's not too late to stop now." Lin Sun's expression was neither sad nor happy. He said, "The Tao is like a chess game. I am willing to be a pawn. Although I move slowly, I will not take a step back." Well said. The eyes of the peerlessly beautiful lady in purple clothes lit up as she blurted out. The other old monsters couldn't help but sneer. No matter how nice it sounded, it was useless. There was no lack of stubborn people in this world. Ling Xiaozi said no more. He picked up a piece and casually placed it on the Can Palace. For a spiritual tattoo grandmaster like him, there were more than tens of thousands of formation maps hidden in his chest, and he could easily set up a strict formation. Reverse yin-yang revolving forbidden formation. The old monsters all recognized it and nodded secretly. This tactical matrix was not very difficult, but it was difficult to crack its mystery without the foundation of a spiritual tattoo master. Even if he knew every single detail of the formation, it would be futile. Once the array was formed, it would be ever-changing and would be completely under the control of the array creator. The higher the Tao pattern attainment of the array creator, the harder it would be to break the array. It was kind of Ling Xiaozi to set up this formation. He didn't mean to deliberately make things difficult for Lin Sun. Obviously, he wanted to make Lin Sun retreat with this formation. "It's over. I have been defeated in front of this formation." This boy, Shunji, couldn't bear to watch it. But to everyone's surprise, Lin Sun just thought for a moment, picked up a piece and casually knocked it down. Crack! The falling piece caused wind and rain, and the breaking of the formation shocked ghosts and gods. The reverse yin-yang revolving forbidden formation, which was favored by the old monsters, was broken in the twinkling of an eye. Many people couldn't help but exclaim and look at Lin Sun. No wonder this boy dared to be so arrogant. It turned out that he had some skills. Shunji opened his mouth wide. He was also caught off guard. He really didn't expect that Lin Sun would break the formation of Ling Xiaozi so smoothly. Interesting. The beautiful lady in purple clothes had a strange look in her eyes. The second round, Lin Sun won. Ling Xiaozi was in a trance for a moment, but he soon recovered his calmness. With his deep eyes, he looked at Lin Sun meaningfully and said, "It seems that my little friend has come prepared. I underestimated you before." "It's your kindness, senior." Lin Sun was neither arrogant nor impetuous, neither humble nor pushy. Ling Xiaozi withdrew his eyes and said, "It's your turn to set up the formation." He had decided to use his real power. As a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos, he had gone through many ups and downs to have today's prestige. Naturally, he wouldn't tolerate failure in a simple task. "Boy, this time you have to set up a powerful formation," Shunji couldn't help reminding him. Suddenly, some quasi-emperors were dissatisfied. "Old Shun, don't you know the rule of not talking when watching a chess game? If you shout again, don't blame me for coaxing you away." Shunji was embarrassed and immediately shut up. Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of all this. After thinking for a long time, he put down a piece. Buzz, a large formation evolved in the Zhen Palace. Ling Xiaozi looked at it for a moment and narrowed his eyes imperceptibly. This formation was a little mature. Even a grandmaster of Taoist tattoos couldn't set it up so mysteriously. "I didn't expect that this boy has such attainments in spiritual tattoos. He is a promising talent." Ling Xiaozi sighed with emotion in his heart. His movements were not slow. He put down a piece and broke the formation in one go, showing the demeanor of a grandmaster of Taoist tattoos. The old monsters present couldn't help showing admiration. Ling Xiaozi was worthy of being Ling Xiaozi. He broke the formation as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The third round, Ling Xiaozi won. Ling Xiao didn't waste his breath. He picked up a piece right away and placed it at the position of the palace. Amidst a droning sound, a large-scale restriction formation that possessed a ghastly atmosphere and numerous variations surged into appearance, and it revealed various miraculous phenomena. Good! The old monsters couldn't help but applaud in their hearts. This formation showed the real level of Ling Xiaozi, which was wonderful beyond words. Shunji looked worried. Ling Xiaozi, the old bastard, obviously used his real means and didn't intend to show mercy to Lin Sun. But Lin Sun was not in a hurry and looked calm. After looking at it carefully for a while, he smiled and put down a piece. Crack! The formation was broken. The old monsters present were all stunned and widened their eyes. This was Ling Xiaozi's real means. Even a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos might not be able to break it. But now it was broken just like this? Aha! Shunji couldn't hold it anymore and shouted again. His eyes changed to look at Lin Sun with a touch of joy, as if he had found a treasure. He didn't expect that this boy hid his strength so deeply. Since he could easily break the formation set by Ling Xiaozi, he should at least have the attainments of a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos. At least, if Shunji encountered this formation, he would definitely not be able to do it. For a moment, there was a strange silence in the field. When everyone looked at Lin Sun, some subtle changes had taken place quietly. Previously, they subconsciously regarded Lin Sun as a junior who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. They didn't despise or disdain him, but just thought that he was young and ignorant, and didn't know when to stop. But now they suddenly realized that this young man, whom they regarded as a junior, actually had extraordinary attainments in the Tao of spiritual runes. At least he was much better than Shunji, the lousy chess player. However, in comparison, they still had absolute confidence in Ling Xiaozi. Because inside and outside the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, who didn't know that Ling Xiaozi's attainments in spiritual tattoos could be described as the best? Ling Xiaozi couldn't help but be in a trance again. This time, he didn't hold back and used the forbidden formation he was best at, but it was still broken. This could only prove that the young man in front of him was not ordinary. Gathering his thoughts, Ling Xiaozi secretly took a breath, and a touch of seriousness appeared between his eyebrows. Lin Sun's performance at this moment successfully aroused the fighting spirit in his heart, producing a fighting spirit that he hadn't felt for a long time. Being invincible, Taiji was also very lonely. Now, there was finally someone worthy of a showdown. Many people acutely noticed the changes in Ling Xiaozi's expression, and they couldn't help but take another look at Lin Sun. This kid was truly unexpected. Lin Sun seemed to be completely unaware of all of this, and his mind was completely concentrated on the game before him. If Ling Xiaozi was said to have the fighting spirit of meeting his match, then Lin Sun was a type of thirst for victory after being delighted by the game. Since ancient times, there were all schools of thought contending for supremacy. Now, he wanted to use his own understanding of spiritual tattoos to compete with Ling Xiaozi. In next to no time, Lin Sun placed a piece. A great formation appeared at the location of the Sun Palace, and it was obscure like mist, indistinct and unfathomable. This time, Ling Xiaozi deduced for the time for an entire incense stick to burn before he had a solemn expression as he picked up a piece and broke this formation. After that, Ling Xiaozi started to set up the formation. The scene was deathly silent. Everyone couldn't help but become nervous, and their minds were completely concentrated on the game. Everyone was able to discern that Ling Xiaozi was undoubtedly strong. But similarly, Lin Sun couldn't be underestimated. Right now, it was Shunji's heart that was the most complicated. There was apprehension, nervousness, excitement, astonishment, pleasant surprise, everything that should be present was present. When Lin Sun first came to Imperial Pass Great Wall, Shunji only treated him as a junior, but who would have thought that this type of junior would give him quite a few pleasant surprises today? But despite this being the case, he still couldn't help but feel nervous. Ling Xiaozi's strength was obvious to all, or else during these years, it would be impossible for him to lose time and time again. But 2 hours later, Lin Sun broke through the formation Ling Xiaozi set up. The group of old monsters couldn't help but be moved. Up to this point, 6 games had already been played. Lin Sun won 3 and lost 3. Ling Xiaozi similarly won 3 and lost 3. It could be said that they were evenly matched, neither side giving way to the other. This type of thing already hadn't happened in Imperial Pass Great Wall for a long time. No one expected that today, a young junior could actually fight evenly with Ling Xiaozi. In that instant, everyone's attitude towards Lin Sun became more and more subtle. It was to the extent where there were even some old monsters whose hearts were shaken, becoming inwardly anxious. If Ling Xiaozi lost, didn't that prove that they had eyes but couldn't see, that they had eyes but couldn't see a gem? In the 7th game, Lin Sun set up the formation. Just setting up the formation took 6 hours of thinking and deducing, and only then did he finally make his move. During this process, the atmosphere also became more and more silent and oppressive. Even as Saint Kings and Quasi-Emperors, they couldn't help but feel their mouths go dry. This type of game was too hard to come by, too rarely seen. P.S. Due to everyone's great support, one more update will be made tonight. Find some time, Goldfish will make 4 updates, finishing off the last 2 updates owed. Chapter 1649. In the 7th game, the formation that Lin Sun set up made all the old monsters present look serious, and a trace of surprise appeared between their brows. Although they were quasi-emperors with extraordinary eyesight and experience, they were not grandmasters who were proficient in the Tao of spiritual inscriptions. When they saw this formation, they only felt that it was shrouded in mist, difficult to understand, and they could no longer see through its mysteries. Unless they could personally walk into this formation and experience it. But this was a game of chess, and the formation was a fictitious thing derived from the chess pieces. It was destined that they could not step into it. This boy is so young, but he is already a real Tao tattoo master. At this moment, all the old monsters were sure that Lin Sun had reached the realm of Tao tattoo master in terms of spiritual inscriptions. This shocked them. Tao tattoo masters were divided into the realm of master and master. In the ancient desolation domain, a Tao tattoo master was enough to be worshipped by an ancient orthodoxy. And among 1,000 Tao tattoo masters, there might not be one Tao tattoo master. Usually, the status of a Tao tattoo master was enough to make the leader of an orthodoxy treat them with respect. As for Tao tattoo masters, it could only be said that they were rare existences, and there were not many of them in the entire ancient desolation domain. Ling Xiao, for example, had been stationed at the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass for thousands of years, helped repair countless large forbidden formations, and blocked countless invasions from foreign enemies. It could be said that Ling Xiao's battle strength might not be as strong as some quasi-emperors, but he was irreplaceable. Therefore, when Lin Sun said he wanted to play against Ling Xiao, these old monsters all felt that it was absurd, and thought that he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. But now they were all speechless, shocked. A Tao tattoo master, even if he only had the cultivation of true saint realm, even if he was just a junior, was enough for them to attach importance and respect. Shun Ji also realized this, and his eyes lit up. If not for the rule of watching chess without speaking, he would have shouted excitedly. This feeling was like picking up a peerless treasure. Where did this little guy come from? And which family is he from? At this moment, the beautiful madam in purple couldn't help but say, "Such a young Tao tattoo master is too rare. Even I want to take him as my grandson-in-law." Shun Ji immediately came to his senses. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, I'm not too sure about that. I only know that I borrowed the power of the divine secret pavilion to come and look for Mr. Shun." Madam in purple rolled her eyes and said flirtatiously, "You're too careless. It's rare to see such an outstanding talent in the entire ancient desolation realm. You don't know anything about him. That's not right. After a pause, she said pensively, however, Divine's secret pavilion was actually willing to expend so much effort to send this child to Imperial Pass battlefield. This child's identity is definitely extraordinary. Shunji was stunned for a moment and then understood. Imperial Pass battlefield, it wasn't that easy to arrive. Only during special times could one safely arrive here. At any other time, if they were to come rashly, just the dangers they would encounter along the way would be enough to kill a quasi-emperor. Meanwhile, this child could actually make Divine's secret pavilion expend so much effort, sending him to Imperial Pass Great Wall at this type of time. This was obviously not ordinary. Whatever, regardless of the outcome of this match, I have to have a good chat with this child. I feel that he is a good match for my granddaughter. The purple-clothed beautiful woman was all smiles, looking at Lin Sun with a kind and amiable expression, like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more she looked at him, the more pleasing she felt. Of course, with the purple-clothed beautiful woman's identity, if she really wanted Lin Sun to be her son-in-law, he could only be her grandson-in-law. There was no way around it, his seniority was too high. Time passed. Ling Xiao couldn't make a move even after a long time. His expression became more and more serious, his back also sitting more and more straight, completely not as carefree and leisurely as he was at the beginning. On the contrary, it was as if he was facing a great enemy. Everyone could see that Ling Xiao had encountered a difficult problem. This made the group of old monsters look at each other in dismay, all of them inevitably shocked. This kid was actually this powerful? Even if it was a spirit tattoo grandmaster, they might not be able to make Ling Xiao expend so much effort. No one knew that Zhu Yingkong, the prince of the Candle Dragon bloodline from the #1 spirit tattoo force in the 9 regions, had suffered a crushing defeat at Lin Sun's hands. No one knew that the spiritual tattoos Lin Sun practiced had nothing to do with the various spiritual tattoos inheritance in the ancient Desolation territory. Because the spiritual tattoos were taught by Master Lu Boya, and Lu Boya came from the other side of the starry sky. In short, it wasn't that Lin Sun had the foundation to beat Ling Xiao in spiritual tattoos, but that the spiritual tattoos he practiced was too unusual. 3 days passed in a flash. For these old monsters, watching chess for 3 days was nothing at all. On this day, Ling Xiao, who had been lost in thought and frowned, suddenly brightened his eyes and said with a smile, "I see." There was a look of relief after a sudden realization on his face. Then, he twirled a piece, made a move, and broke the formation, all in one go. With a snap, the grand formation above the Kuan Palace suddenly vanished into thin air. At this time, Lin Sun couldn't help admiring Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao in front of him was definitely the most exquisite and profound spiritual tattoo grandmaster he had ever seen. Lin Sun secretly marveled at the wonderful means he used to break the formation. The group of old monsters felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. The 7th game was won. Old Ginger was spicier than young Ginger. Ling Xiao deserved to be Ling Xiao. Shunji was on tenterhooks. There were only 2 games left. In the current situation, Ling Xiao had a slight upper hand and won 1 game for sure. He had already won 4 games. Lin Sun had to win the next game. Otherwise, there was no need to play the 9th game at all. He would definitely lose. Because if he lost the 8th game, Ling Xiao would win another game. He had already won 5 of the 9 games. Even if Lin Sun won the 9th game, he couldn't change the fact that he was bound to lose. Therefore, the 8th game was undoubtedly the most crucial for Lin Sun. "My young friend, please take this." Ling Xiaozi took a deep breath and set up the Taoist pattern restriction array that he was most proud of based on deducing all his life. This was also the first time he used this formation in the 9 Palaces game. It could be imagined how much pressure Lin Sun brought him, which was equivalent to forcing him to use his most powerful means. Buzz. Along with Ling Xiaozi's placement of the piece, A magnificent and vast grand formation appeared at the location of the Dui Palace. There was a burst of exclamation in the field, and the silent atmosphere became a little restless. Those old monsters all saw that the magic of this formation could be described as uncanny workmanship. Shunji was exasperated and scolded in his heart, "Ling Xiao, you old thing, it's just a game of chess. Why are you so aggressive? Don't you want to be an elder?" The beautiful madam in purple chuckled and transmitted her voice to Shunji, "You should be happy for this lad. If it is spread out that he can make Ling Xiao go all out like this, even if he loses in the end, it won't damage his reputation." Shunji was stunned and sighed. Of course, he also knew that even if Lin Sun lost, it was enough to change the attitude and views of all the old monsters present. However, how could Shunji be willing to see Lin Sun lose now that the game had gone on? He didn't care about the treasures, but he didn't want Lin Sun to lose. Lin Sun was still unaware of all this. When playing chess, the most taboo was to be distracted, especially at such a critical moment. At this moment, there was an indescribable excitement in his heart. It was as if his fighting spirit had been completely ignited. However, his mind was completely blank. His consciousness was unprecedentedly focused, and all his thoughts were focused on the 8th game of chess. The formation set by Ling Xiao was really strong. It was absolutely the most obscure, strict and wonderful Taoist forbidden formation that Lin Sun had ever encountered since he started his cultivation. It seemed to be natural and invulnerable. However, the more it was so, the more Lin Sun had a desire to conquer it. As time went by, Lin Sun remained motionless like a clay statue. Sometimes he frowned and sometimes he meditated, but he didn't show any disappointment or panic. This made Ling Xiao, who had been observing Lin Sun's expression, couldn't help sighing with emotion that the younger generation would surpass the older. At the beginning, he wanted to give Lin Sun some advice and even teach him a lesson so that he would retreat. Now it seemed that he was a little overconfident. The means Lin Sun had shown from the beginning to the present amazed Ling Xiao, and he didn't dare to treat Lin Sun as a junior anymore. However, the formation of the 8th game was not so easy to break. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao raised the corners of his mouth with an imperceptible disdain. 3 days later, Lin Sun frowned tightly. 5 days later, he was stunned and silent. A group of old monsters had been silent and watching. They gradually realized that Lin Sun had encountered a real tricky problem. Ling Xiao, the old guy, is really amazing in his attainments in spiritual tattoos. Many old monsters sighed with emotion. Of course, Lin Sun was not bad, and he was still extremely young with great potential. In the future, he wouldn't worry about not being able to surpass Ling Xiao. Shunji couldn't bear to watch it any longer. Deducing the formation consumed painstaking effort. If one was obsessed with it, his state of mind would be damaged, and he would easily be possessed by the devil. In Shunji's view, Lin Sun had proved himself and showed enough outstanding ability. There was no need to care about the temporary gains and losses. If you really can't do it, just give up. It's not shameful, however, when Shunji just wanted to say this, he saw Lin Sun, who had been sitting for many days like a clay statue, suddenly pick up a chess piece. In an instant, a group of old monsters who were waiting quietly all narrowed their eyes, and their hearts were in suspense. Ling Xiao was also stunned. Had this lad deduced a way to break the formation? From beginning to end, Lin Sun didn't stop moving. After picking up the chess piece, he naturally put it down without any hesitation. No regrets in putting a chess piece down. Crack! There was a crisp sound. But for a group of old monsters, it was no less than a sudden clap of thunder. Their bodies all trembled. Immediately, they saw that in the direction of the Dui Palace, the formation set by Ling Xiao was like layers of broken illusionary bubbles, collapsing and drifting, magnificent and colorful, and finally disappeared. Did he really succeed in breaking the formation? There was a dead silence in the field. Everyone was shocked. Chapter 1650. All the old monsters were shocked and dumbfounded. With their status, they had experienced many earth-shattering events in the world, but it was the first time for them to see such an incredible thing happen. A young man miraculously broke the formation that Ling Xiao was most proud and confident of. This was something that no one had expected before. It should be known that in the 8th game, Lin Sun sat and deduced for many days, frowning and in a daze. As a result, some old monsters who had been watching were even ready to persuade Lin Sun when he admitted defeat, so that he would not be hit too hard. After all, no one could bear to see such a young and outstanding Taoist tattoo master collapse. But now Lin Sun casually made a move and broke the formation in the twinkling of an eye. For a moment, all the old monsters stared at Lin Sun as if he was a little monster. Ha 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 ha. Shun Ji was dumbfounded at the beginning. His throat rolled and he made a sound like a duck, unable to hide his shock. But immediately, he laughed wildly, his voice like thunder, surging and rolling. He won. In the 8th game, Lin Sun successfully broke the formation. This made Shun Ji's tension, anxiety, and worry, which had been suppressed, suddenly burst out like a flood bursting a dam. He was so happy that he wanted to sing loudly. The beautiful madam in purple couldn't help but let out a long breath of turbid air. She patted her plump breasts with her white hand, and her rosy lips showed an intoxicating smile. She looked at Lin Sun with a kind of doting kindness. This boy was amazing. She was even slightly worried. Even though her granddaughter could be said to be talented, intelligent, and an outstanding beauty, would she be a match for this kid? At this time, Ling Xiao was stunned as if struck by lightning. His lips trembled slightly, and he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. This was his trump card, which he had devoted all his efforts to. It could be said to be the highest achievement of his cultivation so far. But in the end, it was still broken. It was broken by an excessively young junior as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. There was no regret in making a move. Wind and thunder rose, ichthyosaur changed, and the sun and moon changed. The silent atmosphere was fermented in shock. After a long time, Ling Xiao looked at Lin Sun opposite him with a complicated expression and said, "Little friend, you are very talented. This old man admires you." It was just a few words, but the crowd was stirred again. In the path of spirit runes, Ling Xiaozi had attainments that were enough to make a group of quasi-emperors sigh in admiration, but now, he was in admiration for a junior. Obviously, in Ling Xiaozi's mind, Lin Sun was already an existence that could stand on equal footing with him. At this time, Lin Sun still looked calm and indifferent. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior, you flatter me." His countenance was slightly pale. These past few days of deduction and pondering had caused his mental strength to be greatly exhausted. Even though he was dealing with Tao-marking formations, it was much more difficult than fighting his enemies. This caused Lin Sun to involuntarily sigh. Ling Xiaozi's attainments in spirit runes were definitely top-notch existences in the Grandmaster realm. It could be said to be the work of the gods and was marvelous to the peak. There's only one round left. Little friend, please set up the formation. Ling Xiaozi took a deep breath and said in a low voice. At present, 8 games had been played. He and Lin each won 4 games. Now there was only the 9th game left. If he could break Lin Sun's formation, he would win the final victory. If he couldn't, he would be defeated without a doubt. Ling Xiaozi, why don't you just let it go? You, one old and one young, are evenly matched. If this game can end in a draw, it can be said to be the best of both worlds and everyone will be happy. An old monster couldn't help speaking out. Yes, this boy just wants some experience of breaking through to the great sage realm. We will not be stingy to give it to him. Others also spoke out one after another. If Ling Xiaozi was defeated in the 9th game, it would be a big blow to his reputation after all. Similarly, if Lin Sun was defeated, it would not only hit his spirit, but also make Ling Xiaozi, as a senior, seem to be bullying the young. Shunji also nodded surprisingly. Yes, it's best if everyone is happy. Lin Sun looked at Ling Xiaozi. Ling Xiaozi refused without thinking. There is no seniority. Do you think that I, Ling Xiaozi, can't afford to win or lose? At the end of his words, there was a touch of disdain between his eyebrows. He looked at Lin Sun and said, Little friend, if you regard me as a friend despite the difference in age, go all out in the 9th game and show your strongest means. No matter what the result of the game is, you and I both ask for no regrets. What do you think? Ask for no regrets. It could be seen how broad and open Ling Xiaozi's mind was. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said with a smile, It's better to be polite than to be polite. Ling Xiaozi laughed. For this reason, I will give some of the mysterious divine marrow syrup to old Shun after the game. Shunji was stunned and immediately said angrily, If you had done this earlier, there wouldn't have been so many troubles. I think you are just looking for trouble and need to be taught a lesson. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Of course, this was a harmless joke. Lin soon began to set up the formation. He seemed to have planned it for a long time. Without thinking, he picked up a piece and pressed it on the position of the middle palace. Buzz. A Taoist restriction formation swiftly took shape. This formation was like a reflection of the starry sky. There were a myriad of stars flickering within it, and it revealed a boundless, mysterious, and vast atmosphere. All the old freaks restrained their smiles, and they held their breaths in concentration as they carefully observed it. Everyone knew that in this last game, no matter if it was Lin Sun who set up the formation or Ling Xiaozi who broke it, both of them would go all out. It was like a battle between experts, one attacking and the other defending, whereas Lin Sun had already made a move. After observing for a long time, the brows of all the old freaks gradually furrowed, and the seriousness in their eyes grew denser and denser. The same feeling arose in their hearts. This formation was all-encompassing like a boundless sea of stars, and it was impossible to measure. When they looked at Ling Xiaozi again, he was already sitting upright and still. His eyes were suffused with divine light, and his body and mind were completely concentrated, causing him to have a dignified appearance. Along with the passage of time, the atmosphere in the field became more and more silent. It was like a reincarnation had been performed in the last game. This time, Ling Xiaozi was the same as Lin Sun who was breaking the 8th game, and he didn't move for a long time. 2 days later, his brows gradually furrowed. 5 days later, he picked up a chess piece, making everyone's breathing stop in response. However, in the end, Ling Xiaozi still couldn't make his move. His palm and fingers stroked the chess piece, entering a state of silence again. Time flowed on bit by bit. In the depths of a silent starry sky, who knew how far away from Imperial Pass Great Wall, there were tombs that quietly floated like meteors. On one of the tombs, an enormous blood mosquito that seemed to be made of blood and had 16 pairs of wings on its back suddenly let out a happy cry. Its 16 pairs of wings also began to tremble fiercely. Hong Long. A wave of terrifying and vicious aura spread from this underworld river blood mosquito's body, making the ancient tombs nearby explode one after another. At the same time, the enormous blood mosquito had swiftly transformed into a thin and mighty figure that stood in the air like a peerless evil god. His blood-red hair fluttered about, his blood-red eyes like diamonds, his facial features like fine carved jade. Within his handsomeness was a wave of evil energy. Behind him, a scarlet-red cloak fluttered about in the void. Refining the blood of 1,000 saints, fusing with the remnant souls and wills of ancient heroic spirits, has finally allowed my cultivation to reach an unrivaled level. The blood-robed young man released a sigh of satisfaction, his eyes like strange vortexes that flickered with terrifying light. Voila! Along with a thought from the blood-robed young man, a strange blood lotus platform that was formed from 36 blood-red wings appeared in his palm. It was covered in dense and strange underworld symbols, and bloody light scattered down like a waterfall, as if it was the source of the underworld river. After so many years, this underworld god lotus platform has finally been formed by me, the blood-robed young man muttered. In the end, he suddenly roared with laughter towards the sky, his head of blood-red hair fluttering about madly. From today onwards, I am unrivaled at the peak of the true saint realm. His excited, disdainful, and proud voice resounded in this silent, starry sky. Meanwhile, the blood-robed young man's figure had long disappeared. Time passed, and the 9th game had already gone on for 10 days. In these 10 days, Ling Xiao didn't move at all, like a withered tree. However, now, his thin face was extremely serious, faintly suffused with a pale color. His eyes were filled with wisps of blood. All the old monsters' hearts were in suspense. No one dared to disturb Ling Xiao for fear of delaying his thoughts of breaking the formation. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. If today's game was spread throughout the Great Wall of Imperial Pass and known by everyone else, they probably wouldn't dare to believe it. A young junior actually baffled Ling Xiao in a game of chess. Who dared to believe it? Regardless of the result of today's game, the attitude of all the old monsters present towards Lin Sun had undergone a tremendous change. The younger generation would surpass the older in time. Huff! Suddenly, Ling Xiao, who was like a withered tree, finally moved. He let out a long breath of impure air, and his eyes were suffused with unconcealable joy as he said, "I understand." Everyone's spirits were lifted. Meanwhile, Shun Ji's heart trembled. Ling Xiao, this old guy, actually comprehended a way to break the formation? Little friend, this old man won't be polite. Ling Xiao's entire being was in high spirits, confident and calm. Please. Even at this time, Lin Sun's expression still didn't change. Ling Xiao picked up a piece, lightly tapping it on the central palace. Immediately, a rain of light fluttered about. The formation Lin Sun set up collapsed and disappeared, no longer existing. When the old monsters saw this, they all simultaneously released a long sigh of relief, revealing pleasant surprise, gratification, and emotional expressions. This final game of chess looked simple and dull, but it was actually the most hair-raising. Fortunately, Ling Xiaozi won. Meanwhile, even though Shun Ji already understood that Lin Sun's display was sufficiently experienced and powerful when he saw this scene, he still couldn't help but sigh inwardly, feeling a bit unwilling and frustrated. The beautiful purple-clothed madam couldn't help but sigh as well. Ling Xiao was Ling Xiao, he was superior in this game of chess. Little friend, thank you for letting me win. Ling Xiao spoke after taking a deep breath. He originally wanted to restrain the excitement and joy he felt, but in the end, he couldn't conceal it. There was a smile between his brows. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this game of chess was definitely the most troublesome one he had encountered in his entire life. This was especially the case when he successfully broke the formation. The feeling of joy and excitement he felt was also incomparable. Chapter 1651. This kid has such a calm temperament. Ling Xiaozi was surprised. Such a game made him, a quasi-emperor, feel uncontrollable, but Lin Sun didn't seem to care. Don't be discouraged, my young friend. It's amazing that you can fight with the old guy Ling Xiaozi to this point. Yes, although you lost this game, it's glorious. Come on, everyone, inscribe your experience in breaking through the great sage realm on the jade slips and give them to my young friend. Those old monsters spoke with kindness, worried that Lin Sun would be depressed after this defeat. Hey little guy, cheer up. I absolutely believe that sooner or later, you can beat the old guy Ling Xiaozi. Shun Ji also comforted Lin Sun. Young people were all spirited, especially Lin Sun, who had reached the level of Tao Tattoo Grandmaster in spiritual tattoos. He must be unyielding and unyielding. But such people often couldn't withstand too much frustration and blow. Shun Ji was naturally worried that Lin Sun would lose his spirit because of this defeat. The beautiful madam in purple said softly with a murderous tone, "My young friend, do you want me to help you beat up Ling Xiaozi?" Ling Xiaozi stiffened and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Were these old fellows blaming him for bullying the weak? At this time, Lin Sun also smiled bitterly and said, "Seniors, in my opinion, the result of the 9th game hasn't been decided yet." Everyone was stunned, and they subconsciously thought that this kid wouldn't have suffered too great of a blow and couldn't endure it, right? This game of chess had clearly ended, and they had all seen it clearly. Ling Xiaozi was also stunned. He moved his eyes and looked at the 9 palace map again, but he didn't find anything wrong. The formation of the 9th game had been completely broken by him. "Boy, it's just a momentary defeat. Don't be too paranoid." Shunji couldn't help saying, worried. Others also spoke. "My young friend, if you're not convinced, I can explain some of the means I used to break the formation. It's not very clever, but it may give you some inspiration." Ling Xiaozi said softly. Through this game, he appreciated Lin Sun very much, as if he had met a confidant and regarded Lin Sun as a friend who could stand on equal footing with him. He couldn't bear to bring some bad influence to Lin Sun. Lin Sun smiled bitterly and said, "Seniors, please have a look." As he spoke, he snapped his fingers lightly. All the old freaks had doubtful expressions as they looked at the 9 palace diagram once more. After that, all of them suddenly opened their eyes wide as if they were struck by lightning. Starting from the Qian Palace, a strand of Taoist light flickered and dense runes rose, like a blossoming flower. It was extremely beautiful. Then, at the 4 positions of the Zhen Palace, the Sun Palace, the Kuan Palace, and the Central Palace, spiritual lights of Taoist patterns rose one after another and outlined the formation in their respective blank worlds. All of a sudden, Ling Xiaozi's smile froze. The joy and excitement in his heart vanished without a trace as he stared fixedly at this outrageous scene. The other old monsters were also dumbfounded. What was going on? F***ck me. Shunji was so excited that he almost jumped up and directly cursed. This formation could actually be revived? Everyone could see that these 5 positions were the formations laid by Lin Sun, which had been broken by Ling Xiaozi one by one before. But now they all appeared again. This was undoubtedly too inconceivable. Ling Xiaozi frowned and suddenly blurted out, "No, this isn't the original Taoist forbidden formation, but a brand new formation born from nirvana in destruction." Lin Sun sighed inwardly. Ling Xiaozi was worthy of being the #1 spiritual tattoo grandmaster of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, seeing through the mystery at a glance. The reason why this scene appeared was because of the phrase, nirvana in destruction. From the beginning of setting up the formation, Lin Sun realized that it was doomed to be impossible to win against a grandmaster like Ling Xiaozi in the 9 games. Therefore, he painstakingly found another way and prepared a backup plan when he laid the formation. For example, the first, small firmament forbidden formation, laid by him was looked down upon by the old monsters when he laid it out, thinking that this formation was too ordinary and ordinary. Of course, this formation was indeed very ordinary, but how could Lin Sun not know this? The reason why he laid this formation was not to win, but to prepare a backup plan. When the small firmament forbidden formation was broken, it would turn into a kind of original power that was needed for nirvana. Similarly, the Taoist forbidden formations laid in other positions were the same. In this way, at the final moment of victory or defeat, he could suddenly make a surprise attack and destroy the nirvana, thus achieving the goal of winning by surprise. Of course, all this was not over yet. Before the old monsters came back to their senses from the shock, they saw that in the 4 positions of Ken Palace, Zhen Palace, Li Palace, and Dui Palace, there were also dense and gorgeous Taoist patterns emerging. The old monsters' eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets, and they were shocked into a trance. It should be known that these 4 positions were laid by Ling Xiaozi, and later were broken by Lin Sun one by one in the game. But now, Taoist forbidden formations also emerged. What was going on? Could it be that Lin Sun had a backup plan, and so did Ling Xiaozi? They looked at Ling Xiaozi. Ling Xiaozi shook his head bitterly. I didn't prepare this. If I'm not mistaken, this is the foreshadowing and the backup plan left by Lin Sun when he broke the formation. As he said, he was in a trance again, and it was obvious that he was greatly shocked. At this time, on the entire nine-palace diagram, a Taoist forbidden formation emerged in each of the 9 palaces. These 9 Taoist forbidden formations were in harmony with each other and actually integrated into a complete formation. When they saw this scene, everyone present was dumbfounded. This level of attainment in spiritual inscriptions could simply be said to surpass the work of nature. It was extremely profound and indescribably wonderful. It turns out that the real killing move is hidden outside the game. I'm completely convinced. A quasi-emperor sighed with emotion. Who could have thought that there would be such a change after 9 games? Who could have thought that a young man should have such incredible means of spiritual tattoos? Before, they all thought that Lin Sun couldn't accept the defeat. Today, it's really an eye-opener for me. A quasi-emperor clicked his tongue in wonder. Shunji, on the other hand, was ecstatic and laughed. Today's match was simply full of ups and downs and variations, and every single one of them was unexpected, causing it to be extremely satisfying. It's over. Now I'm only worried about whether my granddaughter can enter his eyes. The beautiful madam in purple supported her forehead with her hand and sighed. The other bigwigs also had looks of amazement on their faces. Everyone could see that Ling Xiaozi was actually defeated in the last game. He seemed to have succeeded in breaking the formation, but in fact, he didn't notice that the real means of Lin Sun's arrangement was actually the big formation that was now reflected. He didn't notice it and didn't break it, which meant that he was one move behind and fell short of success. Ling Xiaozi's expression was uncertain. He stared at the 9-palace diagram without saying a word. All of a sudden, a group of old monsters couldn't help but worry about Ling Xiaozi. This old guy had been famous for a long time, but now he was suppressed by a younger generation. Would he be unable to bear such a blow? Ling Xiaozi, take it easy. As the saying goes, the new generation excels the old generation. In the world, people today surpass the ancient. A temporary defeat is nothing. Someone had begun to console him. Shunji even grinned and shouted, "Old thing, don't you think about how many times you've beaten me over the years? Have I ever been beaten by failure?" Hearing this, Ling Xiaozi seemed to come back to his senses and said angrily, "In the spiritual tattoo field, you're nothing." As he said, he stood up, bowed and said, "My young friend's talent is far better than mine. I admit my defeat. Senior, please don't flatter me. In this game, I can only say that I used some petty cleverness and laid out a plan from the very beginning." Lin Sun hurriedly got up to avoid it. He couldn't bear such a big bow. All the old monsters secretly praised him. Not arrogant in victory and not discouraged in defeat, this young man's demeanor was extraordinary. But Ling Xiaozi shook his head and said with a smile, "Boy, don't be modest. The game of 9 Palace is originally about the means of layout. You can control the whole situation, set up a killing move outside the game, and hide a shocking thunder in silence. It can be called a stroke of genius. How can I not be convinced? Alright, don't be modest anymore. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Come, hand over all the stakes first." Shunji was in high spirits, shouting loudly. The old monsters almost rolled their eyes. "This game wasn't won by you, old Shun, so what are you being so cocky for?" However, with their status, even if Shunji didn't remind them, they wouldn't go back on their words. Soon, they handed over jade slips to Lin Sun. Inside each jade slip was a piece of experience and comprehension about breaking through to the Great Saint Realm. For others, it might not have any value. But for Lin Sun, who was currently pondering and seeking to break through to the Great Saint Realm, it could be called a priceless treasure. With these experiences and insights, it was enough for him to avoid many detours. By verifying with each other, he could also better understand how he should walk on the path of cultivation. Lin soon thanked them one by one, feeling extremely gratified. This trip to Imperial Pass Great Wall really was the right decision. There were a group of old monsters stationed here, every one of them with shocking cultivation, like senior experts. Being able to obtain some cultivation comprehension from them was undoubtedly no different from obtaining a great fortune. Ling Xiaozi was also very straightforward, handing over a bottle of mysterious divine marrow serum to Lin Sun, and specially warning, "Little friend, after you step into the great saint realm, you can use this treasure to temper your foundation, temper your state of mind. Remember, you absolutely cannot give it all to old Shun." Shunji said angrily, "I wouldn't do such a despicable thing." Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Lin Sun also laughed. The demeanor and bearing of these seniors made him rather impressed. At least, from the beginning to the end, they didn't reject or look down on him because he was a junior. "Little friend, are you willing to drink a cup with this old woman?" The extraordinarily beautiful madam in purple dress spoke with a smile, extending an invitation to Lin Sun. She was very interested in this junior. P.S. I'll listen to everyone and update. Chapter 1652. Before Lin agreed, Shunji shouted, "Okay, let's drink." Other old monsters also clamored for a drink, saying that although it was fun to play chess, it was not as good as drinking in the human world. Seeing this, Lin Sun readily agreed. Seeing this, the beautiful madam in purple couldn't help sighing in her heart. She had planned to take this opportunity to introduce her granddaughter to Lin Sun. Unexpectedly, it became a drinking party in the twinkling of an eye. "Well, since you also want to drink, take out your precious wine. Shun, I remember that you have a jar of snow-surging river, which is 10,000 years old. It's time to take it out to entertain us." Madam in purple glanced at Shunji, who was stiff and forced a smile. He nodded with difficulty, "Yes, of course. And you, Ling Xiaozi, I remember that 1900 years ago, you once excavated a flask of divine wine from an ancient battlefield. It's said to be the personal treasure of a great emperor of the primordial era. Bring it along as well." Madam in purple glanced at Ling Xiaozi again. Ling Xiaozi smiled bitterly, of course. Others couldn't help laughing. Today was a good day. Don't be stingy. How can there be no delicious food in this drinking party? Old Chai, you are a famous glutton in the ancient desolation realm. You have eaten wild game from all over the world. This time, you have to show us your skills. Well, the drunken immortal chicken, which you are best at roasting, will do. And you, Old Qin, you are the quasi-emperor of the Greenwood spirit race. Over the past few thousand years, you have collected countless rare and precious fruit. Take them out for everyone to taste. That's right, there must be the Star Luan Green Peach and the Rosy Dawn Fire Date. All the old monsters named by Madam in Purple were stiff all over. They looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Well, this woman was obviously going to catch all their treasures in one fell swoop. Most formidable of it all was that Madame Zi was extremely familiar with it, and she seemed to know clearly what treasures someone possessed. It was an eye-opener for Lin Sun. Alas, you are so lucky this time. Shunji patted Lin Sun on the shoulder, sighed and laughed. Well, today we will show our powers to welcome our young friend Lin Sun. Ling Xiao waved his hand. Madame Zi said with a smile, "Then let's go to my Mi Luo palace. None of you can escape. Today, not a single one of you can escape." However, just when everyone was about to make a move, a sound of something tearing through the air suddenly came from afar, and a ferocious, ghastly, and bloody smell spread out along with it. "It's that kid from the Blood River Nether clan." One of the old monsters frowned. "Looks like he has already created his own technique and returned from the starry sky graveyard." Someone was deep in thought. Using the remnant blood and heroic spirits of our ancient ancestors to cultivate. That's no different from evil. Someone snorted coldly. He, who asked this guy to be a direct descendant of the dark blood underworld emperor. After being silent for tens of thousands of years, he has awakened today. Not only has he stepped onto the peak of the Tao, he has even become an outstanding figure among the peak true sages. No matter how much I hate him, I can't deny that he is not simple. Someone sneered. Lady Mu, this kid is obviously here for you. If I'm not wrong, he still hasn't given up on your granddaughter. Shunji said with a smile. Madame in Purple snorted coldly, a hint of disgust flashing across her face. She said, I will not betroth my granddaughter to this kind of person. While they were talking, a streak of blood light pierced through the air. This was the Imperial Pass great city, and who knew how many old monsters occupied it. But this streak of blood light seemed very powerful. Only when it reached Shunji's side did it suddenly stop, revealing a slender and stalwart figure. He had blood-red eyes, blood-red hair, and a blood-red cloak. His handsome facial features carried a touch of evil. He stood there casually, like an evil god descending upon the world. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed, his expression strange. Underworld child. It was actually him. On the way to the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, he had seen a huge blood mosquito with 16 pairs of wings, lying on a starry sky tomb to absorb the blood of ancient corpses. However, at that time, Lin Sun found it hard to believe that this would be the underworld child who died in the domain of death. And now the other party had clearly come back to life. How could Lin Sun not be surprised? It seems that it is related to that smelting god pot. Lin Sun's eyes flickered. The underworld child who was killed by him was only left with a pile of minced meat, but it was taken away by the mysterious smelting god pot. This was probably the key to the underworld child's resurrection. In the void, as soon as underworld child arrived, he ignored the other old monsters present and looked directly at Madame in Purple. He cupped his hands and said, Senior, I have successfully created my own method and entered the invincible true saint realm, so I came as soon as I could to tell you this news. Congratulations! Madame in Purple was expressionless, her words stiff. But Underworld Child didn't seem to care at all. He said with a smile, Many years ago, Senior said that if I can step into the invincible true saint realm, you will agree to betroth your granddaughter Luoli to me. Before he finished, he was interrupted by Madame in Purple. I only said that after reaching this step, you are qualified to come into contact with Luoli. I never said that Luoli must be betrothed to you. Luoli? Lin Sun couldn't help but be taken aback. Could it be that Miss Luoli from the Mi Luo Palace of the Earth Imperial Universe? At this moment, Underworld Child's face suddenly darkened. A hint of ruthlessness appeared between his brows. He said coldly, Senior, you are a quasi-emperor, a giant of a region. Are you going to go back on your words now? His words were overbearing and forceful. Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. Where did Underworld Child get the confidence to speak to a quasi-emperor like this? Looking at the expressions of the other old monsters, although they were all frowning, they didn't reprimand Underworld Child for going against his superior. It was as if they were afraid of something. Going back on my words? A cold light flashed in Madame in Purple's eyes. A formless and terrifying pressure suddenly spread out. Bang! Underworld Child, who was standing in the void, was directly suppressed and staggered to the ground. Lin Sun sighed inwardly. This was a quasi-emperor. With a single thought, that kind of power was like the sky, like the abyss, terrifying beyond compare. Only then did Madame in Purple say, If you didn't have a good ancestor, would you dare to behave so atrociously in the Great Wall of Imperial Pass? There is no harm in me telling you, with your character, you still want to marry my granddaughter? Don't even think about it in this lifetime. Her voice carried disdain. Underworld Child's face fell. In that case, Senior sees that I am easy to bully, so you really plan on going back on your words? Going back on my words? Madame in Purple suddenly revealed an intoxicating smile, saying, "What? Don't tell me you want to threaten this old granny? Sure, I won't bully a junior like you. Go and call for people, I want to see what this butcher Gu Liangtsu dares to do to me." Her smile was charming, beautiful and moving. However, the nearby old monsters all knew that Madame Mu was angry. Underworld Child was furious, but he could only endure it. In this great wall of Imperial Pass, there was indeed no one who dared provoke him. It was because there were quite a few old monsters who were subordinates of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. They naturally took great care of him, the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor's descendant. This was also why he had the confidence to face a quasi-emperor like Madame in Purple. However, this didn't mean that he could act out of control in this great wall. "Little fella, don't you find it strange why this underworld child dares to act so arrogantly? It's quite simple, this great wall's number one, Gu Liangtsu, is precisely the backer of this name." Shunji suddenly transmitted sound to Lin Sun. "Gu Liangtsu's achievements in battle are glorious. He has always had great prestige. Because of him, in Imperial Pass Great Wall, no matter how Underworld Child, this junior, behaves, everyone will still tolerate him, not bickering with him." However, this time, Underworld Child actually set his sights on Madame Mu's granddaughter. This is equivalent to crossing Madame Mu's bottom line. When he spoke up to hear, Shun-Ji's voice carried a hint of disdain. If he sincerely wishes to marry her granddaughter, then that is one thing, but everyone knows that this brat has his eyes on Madame Mu's granddaughter's bloodline power. The power of the immortal phoenix bloodline is enough to make any Blood River underworld race drool with desire. When he heard this, only then did Lin Sun completely understand. He couldn't help but transmit sound to ask, "Senior, that granddaughter of Madame Mu, is she that Luoli from Earth Imperial Realms Luoluo?" Shunji stared blankly, then laughed out loud. With a strange look in his eyes, he said, "Brat, have you been eyeing her for a long time?" Lin Sun smiled, declining to comment. Inwardly, he said, "So, it really is Luoli." Previously in the Nine Regions battlefield, Lin Sun had also met her, even drinking and chatting with her. That was a gentle, simple, and beautiful woman with exceptional grace. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that the purple-clothed beauty called Madame Mu was actually Luo Li's grandmother. Right now, Underworld Child's expression was cloudy and uncertain, shaken by Madame Mu's domineering attitude. He felt like he was riding a tiger, unable to dismount, unable to advance or retreat. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that even if Gu Liangtsu came, he wouldn't shed all pretense of cordiality with Madame Mu because of him. But he was also unwilling to give up with his face ashen. For a moment, the situation was deadlocked like this. The group of old monsters couldn't help but reveal ruminating smiles. As a descendant of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, his talent might be unprecedented, but his conduct was too unbearable. Suddenly, Underworld Child's eyes inadvertently glanced over, suddenly seeing a familiar figure. His entire being was stunned, crying out, "Lin Sun?" The old monsters here were all stunned. Underworld Child and Lin Sun actually knew each other? However, soon afterwards they sensed that something wasn't right. It was because Underworld Child's expression immediately became sinister and excited, as if he encountered an unforgettable enemy, killing intent surging. "Ha ha, who would have thought, truly never expected that after so many years, I would actually encounter a little bastard like you in Imperial Pass Great Wall. Could this be the will of heaven?" Underworld Child roared with laughter towards the sky. He was indeed extremely excited. During these years, he hid in Imperial Pass Great Wall, almost crazily cultivating and increasing his strength. Wasn't it all for the sake of getting revenge and erasing his humiliation, killing this great enemy Lin Sun who brought him endless humiliation and hatred? Now, he already established his own method, entering a brand new level from the peak of the true sage realm, becoming an unmatched existence. Coincidentally, it was precisely in this type of situation that Lin Sun appeared. This feeling was as if prey had delivered itself to his doorstep. The group of old monsters couldn't help but frown. They could tell that Lin Sun and Underworld Child not only knew each other, they were enemies. Chapter 1653. Lin Sun stood out, saying with a smile, "It can't be considered an offense, the two of us are old acquaintances. I thought I killed him several times, but in the end, he came back to life. His life is even harder than a stone in a latrine pit." Everyone stared blankly, their expressions strange. This was just too unexpected. They never expected a youngster like Lin Sun, who seemed aloof from worldly affairs, to have such dazzling battle accomplishments. This Underworld Child wasn't simple. No matter how much they loathed him, they couldn't deny that his background, talent, and strength were all top talents of the present world, shockingly powerful. But who would have thought that Underworld Child would be continuously killed by someone? In that instant, their eyes couldn't help but carry a hint of curiosity when they looked at Lin Sun. To be able to make even Ling Xiaozi stumble in the path of spirit tattoos, and then defeat Underworld Child, this was too extraordinary. This brat, just how many secrets were hidden on him? Little bastard, you still dare to be so sharp-tongued even now, don't you know how the word death is written? Underworld Child almost exploded from anger. Lin Sun's words were like sprinkling salt on his wounds, making both old and new grudges surge in his mind. The vicious killing intent around him also erupted. Hong! A terrifying streak of bloody light rushed into the heavens, stirring up the wind and clouds. That dense killing intent actually turned into a seemingly tangible blood-colored smoke signal. What are you trying to do? This is Imperial Pass Great Wall, internal strife is forbidden here. Shun Ji's expression fell, berating. This is between me and him, unrelated to everyone else. If you don't want to harm our harmony, it's best if you don't interfere. Otherwise, I promise that no one will have an easy time. Underworld Child said through clenched teeth. Saints also had times when they were angry. It wasn't because their mental states were bad, but rather because they had something to rely on. Just like the current Underworld Child. The old monsters were all displeased, finding Underworld Child more and more displeasing to the eye. Did he think that just because he had a great backer, he could look down on them? I've let Senior see a joke. I can only blame myself for not completely killing this fella back then, allowing him to randomly bite like a mad dog. Lin Sun smiled, cupping his hands towards Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and the others. However, what he said isn't wrong. This is a personal grudge between him and me. I hope to use this chance to completely settle it. His words were casual, but also carried a type of resolution. Everyone understood that it wasn't just Underworld Child who wanted to kill Lin Sun, but Lin Sun also wanted to use this chance to kill Underworld Child. Ha ha ha, finish me off? Good, it couldn't be better. Everyone, listen up, it's this kid who's courting death. Underworld Child laughed loudly. His blood-red hair danced wildly, and his expression was awe-inspiring. If it weren't for the presence of so many old monsters, he would have attacked immediately instead of wasting his breath. Brat, this is Imperial Pass Great Wall. Even if you have confidence in defeating Underworld Child, regardless of who it is, there is no way you can kill him. This is the rule. No matter who it is, they have to follow it. Shun Ji quickly warned Lin Sun. Lin Sun immediately frowned. It wasn't just the Dark Child. He had to care about the feelings of all the old freaks as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have endured until now. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Lin Sun, I just want to ask you, do you dare to fight with me? Underworld Child shouted loudly, not hiding his killing intent at all. His eyes were scarlet and terrifying. He truly desired revenge too much. Ridiculous! A quasi-emperor berated with a low voice. What do you treat Imperial Pass Great Wall as? Do you believe that I won't suppress you right now and throw you into prison? Underworld Child's expression changed continuously. After a while, he said with a cold snort, I understand the rules. Just open the demonic god arena. Fighting in the demonic god arena can't be considered breaking the rules, right? Clearly, he was determined to fight. Everyone looked towards Lin Sun. The meaning was clear. As long as you don't agree, no matter how arrogant Underworld Child was, it would all be useless. Seniors, you have all seen it for yourself. If I don't agree, this mad dog will definitely bite people. Since that is the case, just let me deal with him. Lin Sun's expression was calm, his eyes cold. He similarly didn't want to miss this opportunity. Fine, Shunji, open the demonic god arena and let them fight. Madame Mu sighed lightly and instructed. Shunji nodded, suddenly rising into the air. With a wave of his sleeve, a violent ripple suddenly appeared in the void. After that, an extremely enormous arena floated up into appearance. It glowed brilliantly and emanated obscure and strange fluctuations of restrictions. This was the demonic god arena. Within Imperial Pass, if there were disputes that couldn't be mediated, they would choose to settle it in the demonic god arena. However, on the battlefield, life and death were not allowed. This was a rule established from the very beginning of Imperial Pass. Swish! Underworld Child didn't hesitate, immediately rushing into the demonic god arena. His figure stood there, his scarlet cape fluttering in the wind. His gaze was ice-cold as he looked down at Lin Sun. Still not coming up to accept death? His voice was like thunder, exploding through the world. His unbridled and insolent attitude made all the old monsters feel extremely uncomfortable. This Underworld Child was simply lawless and out of control. Little friend, are you sure you want to fight him? Madame Mu was a bit worried. Even though Lin Sun had defeated Underworld Child before, that was in the past. The current Underworld Child was already different from the past. He couldn't before and now he still can't. After Lin Sun finished speaking, he stepped into the air and entered the demonic god arena. His expression was calm and composed, as if he was an otherworldly immortal. When the old monsters saw this, they no longer tried to dissuade him. Either way, with them overseeing things, it was impossible for death to happen. Only, they couldn't help but be a bit worried. During these years, Underworld Child had always been cultivating bitterly at Imperial Pass Great Wall. They all saw how powerful the current Underworld Child was. But as for Lin Sun's strength, they didn't understand at all. They could only see that he had similarly stepped into the peak of the Saint Realm, and that his foundation wasn't ordinary. Kill! In the demonic god arena, Underworld Child was about to attack almost immediately. He already couldn't restrain himself, his killing intent boiling to the extreme. Wait! But Lin Sun suddenly spoke. Underworld Child's figure froze, his expression ice-cold as he said, What, are you scared after walking onto the arena? After not seeing each other for so many years, has demon god Lin Sun's courage also shrunk? Lin Sun smiled slightly. You should understand clearly that no matter who wins, there will be no life and death battle. This is obviously very displeasing. I have a suggestion. Before the battle, why don't we make a bet? Underworld Child's eyes flickered. All right. How could he not agree to such a good thing? Crash! Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the Yuan killer sword that looked like a blood-colored Styx river and a blood-stained bronze shield appeared. Then, he said with a smile, if I lose, these two treasures will belong to you. If I win, you will hand over the refining god pot of the Underworld Emperor. How about that? Despicable! Underworld Child almost exploded with anger. The Yuan killer sword and the bronze shield were originally his treasures, but they had been taken away by Lin Sun in the domain of extinction. Now, Lin Sun shamelessly wanted to use them as a bet. How sinister was his intention? What he couldn't tolerate most was that this guy actually had his eyes on his refining god pot, which was his biggest trump card and reliance. The Yuan Killer Sword and the Blood River Shield are the treasures that the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor carried with him before he stepped into the Emperor realm. Ha, I finally believe that Lin Sun once defeated Underworld Child. Shun Ji was instantly amused. The other old monsters also had strange expressions. Of course, it was impossible for them not to recognize the Yuan Killer Sword and the Blood River Shield. What, you don't dare? Lin Sun's words were casual but full of disdain. The Dark Child suddenly took a few deep breaths before he flipped his palm, causing a completely pitch-black divine sword that seethed with terrifying black divine radiance to appear. Moreover, the howls and cries of fiend gods could be faintly heard from it, and it revealed the scene of a ghastly purgatory. He said coldly, "How can the refining god pot of the Underworld Emperor be used as a bet at will? However, this sword is enough." The Avicii sword. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and the others were all moved. Like the Yuan Killer Sword, this sword was a primordial holy treasure. It was mysterious and terrible. It was said that it was born in the purgatory of the underworld, and its killing power was enough to frighten ghosts and gods. The souls of the enemies killed by this sword would be trapped in the purgatory of the sword for eternity, suffering endless torment and suffering. Similarly, the Avicii sword was also the sword of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. Lin Sun's eyes brightened and he sighed inwardly. Underworld Child had too many treasures, but for him, this guy was more like a treasure boy who could bring him some surprises every time. Okay, let's bet on this sword. Almost without hesitation, Lin Sun agreed happily. Humph, but I don't think it's enough. Underworld Child said coldly, no matter who loses later, he must kneel down, kowtow, and slap himself. Do you dare to bet? Obviously, he also knew that with those old monsters here, it would be impossible for him to kill Lin Sun this time. But if he could trample Lin Sun under his feet and suffer endless humiliation, he could barely vent his anger. Are you sure? I'm a little worried that you won't admit it if you lose. Lin Sun's expression was calm. With so many people watching, do you think I will go back on my word? Underworld Child's face was cold, and he gnashed his teeth with hatred. Before he finished speaking, he couldn't restrain the killing intent in his heart and attacked brazenly. His momentum was like a bloody gallop, and with a kind of ostentatious, raging, and unparalleled power, he broke through the shackles of the void and rushed over. Boom! In an instant, the world changed color and was covered by the terrible blood-red killing intent. At this time, Underworld Child was like a peerless evil god coming out of the netherworld, with overwhelming momentum. In his palm, a blood-colored, glassy, resplendent seal whistled through the air, crushing the void. The eyes of the old monsters all shrank. What a powerful force! Was this the power of the peerless true sage who created his own method? Lin Sun didn't retreat or evade. His figure was ethereal and he pressed his palm lightly. Dong! A deafening collision sounded, the world roared, and the light of Tao surged. An amazing scene appeared. Lin Sun's palm force seemed simple and casual, but in an instant, it slapped away the blood-colored glaze seal that was about to break into the air. An Underworld Child's figure, as if being pushed by a mountain, suddenly shook in the void and almost staggered back. What? Shun Ji and Madame Mu were both surprised, with a strange look in their eyes. It was just the first confrontation, but it had such power. Didn't it mean that Lin Sun was not an ordinary peerless true sage? Chapter 1654. Madame Mu's granddaughter is Loka. My hand slipped. I didn't expect that you have reached the perfection of the Saint realm. In the void, Ming Child was surprised. Obviously, in these years, not only his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, but the strength of his enemy, Lin Sun, had also improved. Unfortunately, you are just SOSO. When the cold voice sounded, Ming Child stretched out his body. Crack! A blood-colored lightning as thick as a tree trunk broke through the void. Almost instantly, Ming Child moved again. Holding the blood-colored glass seal, he suddenly smashed it like an evil god. The glass seal was only the size of a fist, but when it appeared in the void, 36 layers of bloody purgatory emerged. In each layer of purgatory, there were thousands of ghostly figures roaring like gods and demons. In a trance, the world seemed to have come to the underworld. Great dark prison seal. An old monster gasped. This was a peerless treasure, containing 36 layers of purgatory, which had the terrifying power to suppress the world and refine the void. Rise. It was different from Ming Child's fierce and violent attack. Lin Sun stood still and waved his sleeve. Layers of sword chi appeared in the void. Each layer of sword chi contained 18,000 swords, shining with cold light and as vast as a sea of swords. At this moment, the sky seemed to be covered with dense sword chi. 33 heavy swords. Go! As Lin Sun's mind moved, layers of sword chi swept out like an avalanche. Bang! 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 Countless sword chi collided with the layers of purgatory. Lin Sun's sword chi was so overbearing that he had condensed the sword chi of a sword emperor not long ago. It was enough to make any top saint tremble. In a series of deafening explosions, the sword chi broke through the purgatory with irresistible force. Suppress. The great dark prison seal in Ming Child's palm suddenly shone. Layers of purgatory world evolved again, and the power was even stronger. Ghostly figures emerged, each with monstrous momentum, ferocious and terrible. Boom! The 33 layers of sword chi, which were originally irresistible, were finally blocked and collapsed, turning into a rain of light floating in the void. The group of old monsters revealed strange expressions. Even though it was only the beginning of the battle, the strength that the two of them revealed was so formidable that it broadened their horizons and surprised them. With the ancient treasure in hand, the Dark Child's ferocious aura was enough to suppress his peers. Lin Sun's sword chi was brilliant, like a vast sea rising in the air, layer upon layer, and the sword intent was like a tide. The power was so great that it changed the color of the world. However, this was only the beginning of the confrontation. When they truly attacked with their full strength, what kind of matchless and terrifying might would that be? This treasure is not bad. I want it. Suddenly, Lin Sun laughed and stepped forward. He looked like a real dragon soaring in the sky. At the same time, he punched out. Surging Saint Chi and world principle strength fused together, causing this simple punch to give off a grandiose aura that seemed capable of shattering the world and causing yin and yang to fall into chaos. Even space was blasted apart, collapsing and cracking apart, and numerous horrifying rifts were torn open. Heaven shaking fist. The Dark Child's scarlet eyes also turned serious at this moment. Only when they really fought did he deeply realize that this opponent that he hated to the bone now possessed such powerful combat power. In his heart, the original rage turned into calmness, and the Dark Child's killing intent soared. So what if Lin Sun was powerful? This time, he would make him kneel and slap his own face. The Dark Child took a deep breath, his expression cold and solemn. The great dark prison seal floated up from his hand. This treasure was made of blood glazed, the divine metal of the underworld. It contained 36 purgatory realms and was engraved with 3,600 Taoist patterns. It had been refined by the Dark Blood Emperor in the boundless blood well for 8,000 years. Since the Dark Child awakened from silence, he had refined this treasure day and night with his own blood essence. Now, its power was no longer the same as it was in the past. At this moment, as the Dark Child used his true power, the great dark prison seal suddenly shone brightly in the void, illuminating the universe. The 36 purgatory realms were like blood-colored worlds, sitting in the void between heaven and earth. For a moment, the Dark Child was surrounded and protected like the ruler of purgatory. This scene amazed all the old monsters present. They couldn't help but sigh that the Dark Child was indeed a direct descendant of the Dark Blood Emperor. Not only was his foundation terrifying, but even the treasures in his hands were extremely amazing. At this time, Lin Sun's fist had already broken through. Boom! The fist energy exploded, the energy surged, and the world shook. Lin Sun's fist energy was like a dragon python rushing into the 36 purgatory realms, colliding and rolling fiercely, setting off a blazing torrent of Taoist light. However, it was blocked in the end. It seems that you, demon god Lin, are no longer as brave as you were in the past. The dark child laughed, his blood hair flying. The 36 purgatory realms, like a cage that sealed the sky and locked the earth, pressed down from the void, trying to trap Lin Sun in it and completely refine him. All the old monster's eyelids twitched. Don't say this too early. Be careful not to slap yourself in the face. Lin Sun let out a long laugh, stepped in the air, and raised his fist again with the momentum of an ancient demon god. Boom! Boom! It was like a thunderclap in the battlefield of deities and demons. Lin Sun's fist energy swept across the void, whistling out, sinking the void and producing a deafening explosion. But no matter how fierce and domineering the fist energy was, it could not break through the 36 purgatory realms that were constantly pressing down. In the eyes of outsiders, Lin Sun seemed to be at a disadvantage. But the quasi-emperors present were very experienced. They could tell at a glance that with every punch Lin Sun threw out, the fist energy would produce a terrifying vibrating force, causing the 36 purgatory realms to also suffer an extremely terrifying impact. It seemed to be intact, but in fact, it was about to completely collapse. Sure enough, there was a change in the next moment. The 9th punch! Lin Sun shouted in the air. His fist force was primitive and simple, but it had the charm of simplicity and simplicity after washing away all the magnificence and magnificence. Even the powerful person who created the 9 strikes for shaking heaven would be amazed when he saw Lin Sun's punch. Lin Sun had already deduced the power and true essence of the heaven-shaking fist. Boom! Ming Child's 36 purgatory realms suddenly exploded. They were not crushed by the fist energy, but at this moment, all 36 purgatory realms collapsed and disappeared. The terrifying fist energy was like a raging wave striking the air, pressing toward Ming Child. This boy is actually so strong? Ming Child was finally moved, his eyes revealing shock. At this moment, he did not hesitate to activate the full power of the Great Dark Prison Seal. But no matter how he changed, Lin Sun's fist energy seemed to be unparalleled, breaking through the layers of killing, extremely strong. This made the group of old monsters dumbfounded. How could the young people of today be so fierce? It should be known that when they were in the true sage realm, they were far from having such unparalleled combat power. Bang! Finally, Lin Sun's fist landed on the Great Dark Prison Seal. In the roar, the void under Ming Child's feet directly exploded, and Ming Child staggered back from the shock, his chi and blood tumbling. When he looked at Lin Sun again, his eyes were filled with anger. This blow put him at a disadvantage, causing him to lose face. It seems that you have not made much progress these years. As Lin Sun spoke, his figure had already shifted, and he stretched out his hand to grab the Great Dark Prison Seal. You dare! Ming Child shouted, his killing intent boiling. This guy actually wanted to snatch the treasure. He clearly did not take him seriously at all. Boom! His figure surged with monstrous bloodlight as he charged up and fought fiercely with Lin Sun. For a time, in the battlefield of gods and demons, Tao sounds rolled, blood light surged, and fist energy surged, causing the sky to change color, the clouds to collapse, and the void to collapse. Many unbelievable scenes played out. There were gods and demons roaring, blood rain pouring, the sky collapsing, stars sinking and the moon falling. The unimaginable battle scene was enough to shock the world. Back then we were indeed not as good as them, Shunji sighed. The other old monsters also sighed, their emotions fluctuating. What surprised them the most was Lin Sun, because this was the first time they saw Lin Sun fight. His combat power was so strong that it completely overturned their original understanding. Only now did they realize that this kid was not just a peerless genius that possessed the ability of a grandmaster in the Tao of spirit tattoos. He himself was a peerless figure with shocking combat strength. If it was an ordinary battle between true saints, these old monsters would not even bother to watch it, nor would they have the mood to watch it. But the battle before them had completely drawn their attention, and they were deeply afraid of missing the slightest detail. Little friend Lin Sun is definitely not an ordinary figure. A figure like him is bound to not be a nobody, and even in the entire ancient desolation region, he can be called a peerless genius. Now I'm even more curious. What sort of past does he have? Madame Mu's beautiful eyes rippled with extraordinary splendor. I'm slightly worried that Ming Child has many secret treasures and trump cards. Shun Ji pondered deeply. Lin Sun's combat strength shocked him as well, but at the same time, he was clearly aware of how terrifying the resources of Ming Child, a descendant of the Dark Blood Emperor, were. In the battlefield of deities and demons, the battle grew fiercer and fiercer. In the end, the figures of Lin Sun and Ming Child could hardly be seen. All that could be seen was a clear light and a bloody light fighting. Every time they collided, it would bring up gales and lights that filled the sky. Fortunately, it was in the battlefield of deities and demons, otherwise the entire Imperial Pass city would have been destroyed into a complete mess. Bang! After another collision, the bloody figure retreated violently in the void. He was actually sent flying by Lin Sun's punch, and the nearby void was shattered. Ming Child, show me your true ability. Didn't you create your own method? Let me see it. With your current means, it's far from enough. Lin Sun stood upright in the void, his figure brilliant. His temperament was like that of a banished immortal, but his power was like that of a demon god. That kind of demeanor was simply beyond the imagination of the old monsters, leaving them speechless. You're courting death. Ming Child was furious. His face was terrifyingly cold. Even though he had been shaken back and seemed to be in a bit of a mess, he didn't seem to have suffered any serious injuries. All these years I've swallowed my anger, put in great effort, and exhausted all kinds of good fortune. Finally, I've comprehended the true knowledge of my own method. It's called the Lotus Platform of Nether God, Ming Child said indifferently. Chapter 1656. Boom. Blood-colored Taoist light burst out of Ming's slender body. He was like the master of this realm. His blood-colored hair was sprinkling with wisps of Taoist light. A lotus platform could be faintly seen beneath his feet. It was crimson-red like blood, and it was formed from layers of wings that were covered in dense and obscure netherworld markings. Standing on it, Ming's son was like a god. At this moment, the old monsters were shocked. What a powerful Taoist law! This was a method that led to the invincible true sage realm. It belonged to Ming's own law. Any true saint who could achieve this step was a peerless figure that could dazzle the world. Their battle prowess was terrifyingly strong, and it was not difficult for them to suppress a realm. At the same time, Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with surprise. Ming's son had never entered the nine-region battlefield, but he could become a sage at the peak and even create his own law. Such aptitude was much stronger than many of the 8 skills of green darkness. But soon, Lin Sun regained his composure. When it came to creating one's own law, in the current world and throughout the 9 regions, who had attracted the tribulation of law crossing because of creating one's own law? Almost none. Even if there was, it could never be Ming's son. Lin Sun could tell just by looking at the aura of Ming's son. 9 breaks of God of Underworld, star breaking. Ming's son stepped into the air. His whole body was like a blood-colored rainbow. Accompanied by an earth-shattering roar, he pressed out his palm. The palm print condensed into the shape of the lotus platform of God of Underworld, flowing with blood. It showed a terrible scene of thousands of stars collapsing and destroying Zhou Su. If one said, Ming's combat power could be regarded as the top of the absolute sage realm. Then at this moment, he had a kind of invincible momentum. His law was with him, and his Tao and appearance were in harmony with the power of heaven and earth. He was unimaginably powerful. This is getting interesting. Lin Sun's black hair floated and his clothes fluttered. He punched out. This punch was ordinary, without any fist momentum. It was like a child's scribble. But when this punch was punched out, everyone had a feeling that they saw the Great Way appear and gather in this punch. The Great Way had no name, but the strong one was called Tao. Lin Sun's punch, however, showed a sense of completion, freedom, and mystery of primitive simplicity. Bang! There was a loud explosion. The blood-red palm print and fist collided, and it rumbled as it spread out in the Fiend God arena. It was like the sun was colliding, and it revealed the scene of destruction. Lin Sun's body shook slightly. He understood and said, "It seems that the self-cultivation method you created is just SOSO. He blocked it. The group of old monsters sucked in a breath of cold air. The youngsters nowadays were much more ferocious than they had been in the past. The might they displayed made them feel incredulous. Lin Sun, you're indeed a peerless figure. You've managed to cultivate 3 different Taoist paths at the same time. Now that you've reached the peak of the true saint realm, you've already cultivated to the level of truth awareness. Ordinary people wouldn't be your opponent." At this moment, the underworld child's expression was indifferent and calm. However, his gaze was even brighter. "Unfortunately, you've met me. At best, you're nothing more than a whetstone. Today, I'll use you to temper myself." Rumble. At this moment, the dark child made his move again. His figure stretched out like an evil god. He stretched out his arms and formed an obscure palm print in the void. Suddenly, the power of the heavens seemed to be drawn, all boiling and surging, merging into the palm print. The underworld god Lotus platform appeared, and its light was like the sun, illuminating the heavens. The second break of the underworld god, sun whirling. The palm pressed out like the underworld god swinging up the sun, suppressing the world. This is the self-cultivation method. The fusion of the law and the Taoist path, the unity of the spirit and the will, is enough to release all the power that one possesses. It has the invincible momentum of "I'm the top at the end of the Great Way." A quasi-emperor old monster sighed. "Open." Lin Sun was not afraid at all. His momentum was like a real dragon, and his power was like a demon god. He moved through the void and raised his fist to kill. It was simple and direct. The fist force and the palm print collided, and finally collapsed in the void. The terrifying wave of destruction caused the Fiend God arena to shake violently. Thump, thump, thump. In the rain of light, Lin Sun's figure retreated a few steps, his clothes fluttering. In the eyes of outsiders, he was obviously at a disadvantage in such a confrontation. Many old monsters felt their hearts tighten. Third break, prison suppression. At this moment, the underworld child's power was boundless, and his entire body surged with a monstrous blood-red Taoist light. When his palm pressed out, it was like a prison of the heavens and the earth, and it intended to refine everything in the world. Lin Sun's expression was neither sad nor happy. The Saint Chi around his body surged like a raging wave, and he pointed out in the air and suddenly collided with the palm print that descended from the sky. Bang! Lin Sun's figure retreated explosively by 10 feet. On the other hand, the underworld child's momentum was like a rainbow. He pressed forward without the slightest hesitation, and his expression was filled with indifference and killing intent. Fourth break, yin and yang division. Fifth break, 5 elements disorder. Sixth break, ghost and god execution. Seventh break, every time he struck out, the underworld god Lotus platform revealed a different might, and it developed a terrifying and peerless force that seemed to be able to strike the 9 heavens and sweep away all obstacles. This was the underworld child's self-cultivation method. With the underworld god Lotus platform as the source, he formed 9 great palm prints, and every strike contained boundless profundities. All the old monsters were dazzled by the sight of this. If it was said that Lin Sun had the strength to confront and suppress the underworld child earlier, then it was the complete opposite now. Just like at this moment, Lin Sun was in a completely passive position. He was firmly suppressed by the underworld child's self-cultivation method, and his figure was shaken back from time to time. Shunji, Madame Mu, and the others couldn't help but worry. After a moment, the underworld child's momentum was like a rainbow, and he suddenly let out a roar. Ninth break, eternal death. Boom. This time, a palm print turned into a lotus platform that covered the sky and the earth, and it rumbled down from the void. The power of this strike was more than twice as strong as before. The expressions of many old monsters changed slightly, and they were ready to take action. Because this palm was too terrifying, and its power was so strong that the huge battlefield of gods and demons suddenly buzzed and trembled. But to everyone's surprise, Lin Sun didn't dodge, and there was not a trace of panic on his face. Instead, there was a touch of ridicule. Perhaps the self-cultivation method was the way to become invincible in this realm. But such methods were also divided into high and low levels. At least, after the previous confrontations, Lin Sun had completely understood that the self-cultivation method of the underworld child was indeed just SOSO. It should be known that in the previous battles, Lin Sun hadn't even utilized the profundities of the great Tao Furnace scripture, and he'd already blocked the various attacks of the underworld child. In the blink of an eye, the underworld child's ninth break had already arrived, and its strength was extraordinary, and its aura of destruction threw space into disorder. Lin Sun didn't hold back any longer, and he struck out with another simple punch. However, compared to before, the concept and true essence of this punch were completely different. It was like a furnace of the heavens and the earth, and it could accommodate a myriad of techniques and daos within it. Rumble! Rumble! Rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth resounded out. The battlefield of gods and demons was filled with scenes of chaos, unrest, and destruction. Countless torrents of light swept out, and merely the aftershock emitted was sufficient to annihilate any ordinary true saint. To the astonishment of all the old monsters, when the dust and smoke dispersed, Lin Sun, who they'd thought to be in a hopeless situation, was standing on the spot without the slightest injury. His figure was like a great furnace that lay across the ages, and he wasn't afraid of the assault of any wind. On the other side, the underworld child's figure seemed as if it was swept by a gale, and he staggered back in the void, and he was only barely able to stabilize his figure after moving over 30 m away. But his face was full of horror, and he said, "This is impossible." His voice was full of disbelief. Not long ago, he created his own method, and he believed that he had entered the threshold of invincibility among the absolute true saints. Looking at the whole world, he could be called the venerable in this realm. In fact, in the previous battle, it did make him extremely happy, and he suppressed Lin Sun to the point that he couldn't even lift his head. Especially when he displayed the ninth break of Infernal God. He had already planned to defeat Lin Sun and force Lin Sun to kneel on the ground. But it was at this most powerful blow that he was most proud of that an accident happened. This unexpected blow made the underworld child a little confused. Not only him, but all the old monsters present had originally planned to rescue Lin Sun. They were worried that the underworld child's attack would be too heavy and cause Lin Sun to be injured or killed. But who would have thought that such a scene would play out? It seems that this is your strongest means. Well, today I'll give you a chance to see what a real self-cultivation method is. In the battlefield of gods and demons, Lin Sun's indifferent voice sounded. His words were earth-shattering. This kid had actually created his own method? Those old monsters were dumbfounded. The next moment, they saw Lin Sun stretch his body in the void. Clatter, there was a roar like a vast ocean in his body, and the chi all over his body seemed to be burning and boiling. His whole body showed a kind of abundant and irresistible momentum. Just like a furnace in the sky, it could suppress the past, the present, and the future. As soon as the terrible power was released, the world was shrouded in a layer of great terror, and those old monsters trembled in their hearts. What method was this? How could his breath be so obscure and terrible? Looking at Lin Sun again, his figure appeared out of thin air, overlooking the mountains and rivers and controlling the universe. It was completely different from before. This kid has hidden his strength so deeply. Shunji smacked his lips. The more it is like this, the better. It is not difficult to transcend the mortal and become a saint, but it is too difficult to go from a saint to a mortal. This kid can already do whatever he wants in the true saint realm. Madame Mu commented leisurely. At this time, the underworld child in the battlefield of gods and demons looked unprecedentedly solemn, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. The change in Lin Sun's breath made him feel incomparably depressed. Almost out of instinct, he did not hesitate to use all his strength, as if he was desperate. Whoosh! Nether Child took a deep breath, and then his palm instantly shot out 9 palm prints. Every single palm print revealed a nether god lotus platform of varying profundities. As soon as the 9 palm prints came out, the world trembled and all the colors changed. The momentum of the whole world was so vast, but now it was controlled by the underworld child with his own strength. He poured all his attention into this blow. Condense! The underworld child shouted, and the 9 palm prints merged into one, turning into a shining blood-colored lotus throne. It looked like it was polished out of blood-colored jade, covered with dense underworld characters, magnificent and brilliant. Go! With a stir of his mind, the lotus throne suddenly seemed to have found a target to vent its anger on. It rose into the air and rushed towards Lin Sun. This was undoubtedly the underworld child's trump card, the strongest blow he had gathered all his strength. Its power was so great that it was enough to shock the world. Seeing this scene, everyone held their breath. There will be more updates tonight. In addition, be sure to add the WeChat account of Goldfish, open WeChat, search for the account Xiaojinyu233, and add me.